"All of you, come with me," he said, and the 5 siblings did not hesitate. They moved like a single creature made of bones and fear, barefoot in the dust, eyes fixed on the rifle in his hands as if it were the only thing keeping the world from swallowing them whole. The man's name was Cade Mercer, and he had learned the hard way that when children look at you like that, trouble is already standing behind your shoulder. He'd been riding the north road into Dry Creek when the first rock struck his hat brim. Not hard enough to knock him, just a warning. The second rock hit his saddle horn and rolled off into the sage. Cade pulled up, scanning the scrub and the low rise of washed-out clay that hemmed the trail. Nothing moved except heat shimmer and a pair of vultures drawing circles over the far flats. "Show yourselves," he called, voice flat. He kept it flat on purpose. High voices spooked horses, loud voices got men shot. A whisper answered, not from the brush, from the ground. "Please, mister." Cade swung down, boots crunching on gravel. He walked his horse a few steps off the road and wrapped the reins around a scrub cedar. Then he crouched, listening. The whisper came again, urgent, coming from a shallow cut in the earth where tumbleweeds had gathered. "Down here." Cade eased toward the cut. The dirt there looked wrong, packed in a clean rectangle, as if someone had tried to smooth it with a board. He'd seen that kind of wrong before, in places folks didn't want found. A small hand thrust up through the weeds, fingers shaking, then a head, then a whole skinny boy, climbing out of a hole like a prairie dog. His face was smeared with dust and dried blood. He couldn't have been more than 10. Behind him came a girl, older, maybe 13, with a split lip and a bruised cheekbone. Then another boy, smaller. Then a little girl with hair hacked short like someone had cut it in the dark. Last was a baby-faced boy with one eye swollen nearly shut. 5 of them. All watching Cade like he might vanish if they blinked. The older girl stepped forward first. Her voice tried to be hard and failed. "You alone?" Cade's gaze flicked over the ridgelines, the draws, the long emptiness. "That's what it looks like." "We saw a man behind you yesterday," she said, "but he rode past, didn't stop." Cade said nothing. On the frontier, most men rode past. That was how they stayed alive. The smallest boy grabbed the girl's sleeve. "Lila!" "Quiet," she snapped, but her hand found his hair anyway, smoothing it once. "Mister, you got a gun? You got a horse? You look like you know what you're doing." "That's a dangerous thing to assume," Cade said. Her eyes flashed. "We don't got time for polite." Cade took in their bare feet, the cracked lips, the way the baby-faced one kept shifting like he expected a blow. He'd seen families starve, he'd seen orphans, but he had never seen children living under the ground. "What's your name?" he asked the girl. "Lila Hart," she said. "This is Jonah, May, Silas, and Toby." She rattled them off like a prayer, like names could keep them together. "Our ma's hurt." Cade felt the old instinct pull at him, the one he'd tried to bury under miles and whiskey, and the promise he'd never get tangled in other folks' misery again. He'd been a deputy once, back east of here. He'd worn a badge until a decision he made got the wrong man buried and the right man free. Since then, he'd gone by his own rules. Move on, keep your head down, don't stop for strangers. Then May, the little girl, stepped forward and held out something clenched in her fist. Cade waited until she opened it. A brass button. Army issue. The kind sewn onto uniforms during the war, the kind that didn't end up in a child's hand, unless it came off a man who had been close enough to touch. "We found it," May whispered. "He dropped it when he dragged Pa." Lila's jaw tightened. "He'll come back. He always comes back." Cade's stomach went cold. "Who?" Lila didn't answer right away. She tilted her head toward the horizon, toward Dry Creek, toward the cluster of roofs and smoke that marked the nearest town. "People there know. They just don't say it out loud." Cade straightened, dusting his hands. The sun beat down, cruel and bright. "If you need a doctor, take your ma into town." Jonah, the first boy, let out a laugh that sounded like it hurt. "Town won't take us. Town won't even look at us." Toby, the swollen-eyed one, spoke through his teeth. "Sheriff said if we come back, he'll put us in the cage with the drunkards so folks can get used to the sight." Cade watched them. 5 children hiding in a hole because the town wouldn't help. That wasn't just poverty. That was something rotten with a name. Before he could stop himself, he asked, "Where's your ma?" Lila lifted her chin. You gotta come. Cade's hand hovered near his belt. I'm not going down a hole I can't see the bottom of. It ain't a hole, Silas said, the small boy, voice trembling with anger. It's a door. A door in the dirt, Jonah added, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Cade looked at the smoothed rectangle again. He felt the faint rise of packed earth under his boot like a lid. Show me. They led him off the road, away from the line of sight, into a shallow wash where the clay banks rose shoulder high. The air there smelled of damp and old smoke. Lila knelt, swept away weeds, and revealed a seam. 2 boards fitted tight, edges packed with mud. A trap door, covered with dirt, hidden in plain sight. Cade crouched beside it. The boards were rough, newer than the rest of the ground. Someone had built it with care. How long you been living under there? He asked. Lila's eyes dropped. Since Pa went missing, 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Cade echoed, and couldn't keep the disbelief out of his voice. May hugged herself. We can't go out in the daytime, not unless we're quick. And your ma? Cade pressed. Jonah swallowed. She fell. In there. Hit her head on the ladder. She's not waking right. Cade's jaw tightened. If the woman had a skull fracture, she needed help yesterday. Why didn't you ride to town, steal a horse, do something? Lila's face hardened. We tried. Sheriff took our mule, said we owed taxes. We ain't got no money, so he took what we had. Then he told Ma that if she made trouble, she'd be answering to Judge Rusk. Cade's ears perked at the name. Judge Rusk ran Dry Creek like a man ran cattle, by force and by fear. Cade had heard of him along the trails. Folks said Rusk kept order. Folks also said Rusk kept secrets. Lila watched Cade's reaction like she'd been waiting for it. You know him. I know of him, Cade said. Then you know he ain't the kind of man you ask for help, she said. That's why we hid. Cade stared at the trap door. His choices narrowed, one breath at a time. He could remount, keep riding north, tell himself none of this was his business. That was the smart choice. That was the choice he'd been making for years. But the children didn't look at him like he was smart. They looked at him like he was the last plank on a river crossing. Lila's voice dropped. Mister, we ain't asking you to save us. We just need you to see. If you see it, you'll understand why we can't go to town. Cade met her eyes. He believed her. Worse than that, he believed whatever was under that door was the kind of thing that didn't stay buried forever. He checked the ridgelines again. Nothing. The wash muffled sound. Perfect place for someone to disappear. Cade pulled his canteen from his saddlebag and handed it to Jonah. Small sips, he warned. Then he unhooked a coil of rope and a lantern. The lantern was battered, but it held oil. Lila's gaze went to the lantern like it was a piece of heaven. We ain't had light but candles. Cade struck a match, set the wick, and the lantern bloomed with a yellow glow. The children flinched at first, then leaned in, mesmerized. Before we continue, tell us in the comments from what town you are watching this from, because out here on the frontier, a name on a map can mean the difference between being found and being forgotten. Cade didn't say those words, not out loud. He didn't talk to the air. But the thought hit him anyway. How far a man could ride and still carry the same kind of darkness from place to place, town after town, like it followed the rail lines and wagon ruts. He took the rifle from his saddle scabbard and checked the chamber, one round already seated. He kept it that way. All of you stay behind me, he ordered. We can't, Lila said. Cade looked at her. What do you mean you can't? She nodded at the trap door. It don't open from the outside unless you know how. Cade's eyes narrowed. You're telling me you kids can open it and I can't? Lila's mouth twisted like she hated admitting it. Pa made it. He made it so if someone found it, they couldn't just... She stopped, swallowing. He made it to keep us safe. Cade set his palm on the boards. Cool, damp. He felt for a ring, a latch, a seam that would give. Nothing obvious. Lila reached into the mud at the edge and pulled out a flat piece of iron, like a broken hinge. She slid it into a tiny gap at the corner and twisted. The boards shifted with a soft, sucking sound, like the earth itself didn't want to let go. A breath of air rose from below, cold and sour, carrying the smell of wet wood, sweat, and something metallic that made the back of Cade's throat tighten. The boards lifted just enough to show a black slit. May whispered, Ma? No answer came. Cade raised the lantern, peering down. The opening widened as Lila pried harder. A ladder appeared, rough rungs descending into darkness. The dirt around the frame was packed tight, reinforced with stones. This wasn't some simple root cellar. This was built to last. Cade looked at the siblings. "You sure you want me to go first?" Lila's hands shook, but her voice held. "You said stay behind you." Cade lowered himself onto the ladder. The wood creaked under his weight, and the sound echoed strangely, as if the space below was larger than it should be. He went down rung by rung, lantern held out, rifle slung across his back. The air thickened, the smell sharpened. When his boots finally touched packed earth, he turned and lifted the lantern high. A narrow corridor stretched forward, lined with timber supports. Candle stubs sat in clumps along the walls. Someone had carved marks into the wood. Tally marks, dates, names scratched hard enough to splinter. Cade stepped forward. His lantern light caught a shape on the floor. A woman, slumped against the wall, hair matted with blood. Her eyes were open but unfocused. Her lips moved without sound. "Ma!" Jonah's voice came down the shaft, thin with panic. Cade knelt beside the woman. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck, a pulse, weak, but there. He exhaled once. "Ma'am," he said softly, "can you hear me?" Her gaze drifted toward the light. Her pupils struggled to shrink. Then her hand, trembling, lifted and grabbed the front of Cade's shirt with surprising strength. "Don't," she rasped. Her breath smelled of iron. "Don't let them. Open it." Cade stilled. "Open what?" Her fingers dug in. "The other door." Cade's lantern swung slightly, and its light spilled past her shoulder to the end of the corridor. There, half buried under planks and canvas, was another door, newer wood, iron bands, a heavy padlock bright as fresh coin. And beside it, pressed into the dirt as if someone had been kneeling there for a long time, were boot prints. Big prints, adult, recent. From above, Lila's voice floated down, tight and scared. "Mister, you hear that?" Cade held his breath. A faint scrape echoed from beyond the padlocked door. Then, a slow, deliberate knock from the other side, as if whoever was inside knew exactly where to put their knuckles. Cade raised the rifle off his back and brought it into his hands. The lock shifted. Metal clicked, not from his side, from within. And then the padlock began to turn. As the door started to, Cade didn't move. He didn't blink. The lantern hung in his left hand, its flame quivering, throwing the corridor into slow, breathing shadows. The rifle came up steady in his right. The padlock was turning, not fast, not frantic. Slow, like whoever touched it knew the weight of time down here and didn't fear it. The woman's grip on Cade's shirt tightened until her knuckles went pale. Her lips worked again, barely forming sound. Don't, Cade leaned close. "Who's in there?" Her eyes tried to focus, failed, and then focused anyway, fierce in a way the rest of her body wasn't. "Not who," she rasped, "what they kept." Above, at the mouth of the shaft, Lila's voice sharpened. "Mister, answer me." Cade didn't answer. He kept his ears on the metal. Click. The padlock completed its turn. The sound landed heavy in the corridor, too loud for something so small. Then silence. Not emptiness, not calm. The silence of someone listening back. Cade took one slow step toward the door, heel first, boot placed soft on packed dirt. The iron bands on the door looked new enough to cut you if you dragged a hand along them. Someone had spent money on this. The woman, Ma Hart, tried to push herself up, failed. She clawed at Cade again. "Cade," she whispered, and Cade froze. He turned his head. "How do you know my name?" Her eyes flickered, as if she were looking through him. He said, "A man would come. A man with a scar on his jaw." She swallowed hard. "A man who ran from a badge." Cade felt the old shame hit like a fist. His hand tightened on the rifle stock until the wood creaked. "Who said?" he asked. Her gaze drifted to the ceiling. Your pa said it." Cade's blood went cold. The lantern flame shrank for a second, as if the air itself had thickened. His father was dead. Buried 6 years. At least that was the story Cade had carried across 3 territories. He'd stood on a hill and watched a box go into earth. He'd sworn he'd never come back to it. The door gave a tiny sigh. A seam opened at the bottom, a hairline crack where blackness pressed out. The smell changed. Less damp wood, more old breath, like the air in a cellar that hadn't been opened since winter. Cade lifted the lantern higher, trying to see through the crack. Light hit nothing. The darkness drank it. Something shifted behind the wood, not a person's shuffle, something heavier, dragging. Cade raised his voice, sharp, aimed at the darkness. "Don't move." A soft chuckle answered him. It wasn't coming from the corridor. It came from above. Cade snapped his head toward the ladder shaft. At first, he saw only the rectangle of daylight and the silhouettes of 5 children. Then, behind them, a 6th shape leaned into view, blocking the sun. A man's hat brim, a long coat, one hand resting on the edge of the trapdoor like he owned it. The children went still, as if a wire had pulled tight through their spines. Lila's voice dropped to a whisper. "He's back." Cade's instincts screamed at him to run up the ladder, to get between that man and the children, but his feet wouldn't move, not with the padlocked door behind him and Ma Hart half-conscious at his side. The man above spoke, his voice easy, almost kind. "Well now, look what the prairie coughed up." Cade recognized that tone. Men who talked like that didn't need to shout because they were used to being obeyed. "Step away from the opening," Cade ordered. The man laughed once. "You're down there, Mercer. You want to point that rifle at something, you're welcome to point it at the dirt." Cade's jaw clenched. "How do you know my name?" "Dry Creek knows everything," the man said, and leaned further over. Light struck his face. He wasn't old, mid-30s maybe, with pale eyes that didn't match the sun. There was a neat little smile under his mustache, the kind that looked practiced. "We've been expecting you." Cade angled his body slightly, placing himself between Ma Hart and the corridor. "Who are you?" "Name's Hollis Crane," the man said. "Deputy Hollis Crane, if you care about titles." A deputy. Cade's eyes flicked upward again. No badge glinted, but the way he carried himself matched it. The lazy confidence of authority, the certainty that the law was a tool that bent in his hand. Lila flinched at the word deputy. Jonah's hand tightened around the rope coil at the edge, white-knuckled. Cade kept his voice level. "If you're a deputy, you'll help these children. Their ma's hurt. Needs a doctor." Crane tipped his head. "Doctor?" He made a face like the word tasted sour. "Doc Harlan won't come out here. He don't go under dirt, bad for his lungs." "Then take them to town," Cade said. Crane's smile widened just a touch. "Town's got rules, and those rules say no vagrants, no squatters, no Hart family stirring up trouble with old stories." Ma Hart stirred at Cade's side, a low moan. "Don't," she whispered again. Crane's gaze dropped, and Cade felt it like a hand on the back of his neck. "She's still breathing? That's a shame." Rusk wanted her quiet. "Rusk, the judge." Cade's chest tightened. "Judge Rusk sent you." Crane shrugged. "Judge Rusk keeps the peace." "By dragging families into holes?" Cade snapped. Crane's eyes didn't change. "By keeping the kind of folks you are from sniffing around what ain't yours." Behind Cade, the locked door gave another movement, subtle, like something settling its weight against the wood. Cade forced himself not to look back. Crane leaned closer to the opening, voice dropping like he was sharing a secret. "You can do this easy, Mercer. You climb out, leave the kids, leave the woman, and you ride on like you always do." Cade's grip on the rifle tightened. The children's eyes flicked to him, waiting, begging without words. Cade measured distance in his head. Ladder up, maybe 10 feet. Crane at the rim. If Cade climbed, Crane could shoot him in the face the moment his head cleared. If Cade stayed, Crane could toss something down here, fire maybe, or seal the door and leave them to suffocate. Cade spoke to the children, voice firm, not looking away from Crane. "Lila, listen to me. When I say run, you run. You understand?" Lila swallowed. "Where?" "Down the wash," Cade said. "Stay low. Don't go to town. Head for the cottonwoods by the creek. There's an old line shack 2 miles past. You can hide there." Crane chuckled softly. "He giving you instructions, kids? That's cute." Crane's hand dipped out of sight for a second, and Cade felt his pulse jump. When Crane's hand reappeared, it held a revolver, black and familiar in silhouette. "Now," Crane said, "I don't like mess. And I don't like people thinking they can step into Dry Creek and change how things are done. So here's what's going to happen." He lifted the revolver casually, as if aiming was no more effort than pointing. The barrel settled on Lila's head. Jonah made a sound, half growl, half sob. Crane kept smiling. "You're going to put that rifle on the ground. Then you're going to slide it away from you. Then you're going to sit beside their ma and keep your hands where I can see 'em. And if you do all that, I might let the kids live long enough to walk back to town and be handled proper." Cade felt his vision narrow. "You point that gun at her again." Crane's eyes hardened finally. "I've been pointing guns at children since before you learned to shave, Mercer. Don't threaten me with morality." Ma Hart's hand found Cade's wrist, weak but urgent. She rasped, "His pocket, left side." Cade glanced down. Her fingers trembled as they pointed to his coat pocket. Cade's coat pocket, not hers. He felt it then, a folded scrap of paper he didn't remember putting there. His stomach flipped. Crane's voice cut through. "Well, I ain't got all day." Cade made a decision that tasted like blood. He lowered the rifle barrel, not all the way, just enough to look like compliance. "All right," he said, "easy." Crane's smile returned. "Smart man." Cade crouched as if to set the rifle down. Instead, he snatched the lantern off to his side and whipped it up, throwing the light straight into Crane's eyes. Crane flinched, instinctive, bringing his forearm up. In that heartbeat, Cade fired. The shot cracked through the confined space, louder than thunder. The recoil slammed into his shoulder. The bullet tore into the trapdoor frame, inches from Crane's hand. Splinters exploded. Crane cursed, yanking back. Cade shouted, "Run!" Lila didn't hesitate. She grabbed May with one hand and Silas with the other, shoving them forward. Jonah seized Toby and hauled him after. They scrambled out of sight, their feet pounding dirt. Crane's revolver barked. A scream cut the air, high, short, then silence. Cade's heart lurched. "Lila!" No answer. Crane's boots thudded as he repositioned above the opening, trying to angle a shot down the ladder. Cade snapped another round up, firing blind toward the rim. Another explosion of splinters. Crane swore again. Cade grabbed Ma Hart under the arms. "Can you climb?" She shook her head, barely conscious. Cade cursed under his breath. He couldn't carry her up a ladder with Crane shooting. Then, the paper in his pocket seemed to burn. Cade shoved Ma Hart gently against the wall, pulled the folded scrap from his coat with his free hand, and snapped it open in the lantern light. 2 words, written in a tight, familiar hand. Door 2. Underneath, a crude sketch, a map of the corridor and the locked door at the end. Next to it, a mark, a loose board on the right support beam. Cade's mouth went dry. The handwriting was his father's. Cade looked back at Ma Hart. Her eyes fluttered. She whispered again, "Your pa built it for you." Above, Crane's voice rang down, furious now, stripped of its calm. "You think that buys you time? You're buried, Mercer. You hear me? Buried." Cade shoved the note back into his pocket and moved fast. He stepped over Ma Hart's outstretched legs and headed down the corridor toward the padlocked door. Behind him, another shot from above. The bullet struck wood, showering dust. Cade didn't look back. He reached the iron-banded door and pressed his ear to it, listening. Nothing. Then a slow exhale, too close, like breath on the other side of a wall. Cade swallowed, forcing himself to focus on the map, loose board on the right support beam. He lifted the lantern, scanned the timbers. The supports were rough-cut, stained dark. On the right, halfway to the door, one plank sat slightly proud from the others, its edge not flush. Cade jammed his fingers into the gap and pulled. The board resisted, then popped free with a dry crack. Behind it, a cavity. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small iron key. Cade stared at it, breath locked in his throat. He grabbed the key and turned back to the padlock. Above, Crane's boots scraped again at the rim. "I can wait you out," he called. "I can sit up here till the sun goes down. Those kids'll come crawling back for their ma, and when they do, I'll teach 'em what happens when they run." Cade shoved the key into the padlock. It fit. He twisted. The padlock sprang open with a metallic snap that echoed like a gunshot. Cade yanked it away and hooked his fingers under the iron band, pulling. The door didn't open. It pushed back, from the other side. Cade leaned his shoulder into it, muscles straining, boots digging into dirt. The wood shuddered, then gave an inch. Cold air spilled out, smelling of stone and deep earth. A voice, low, hoarse, spoke through the crack. "Cade?" Cade froze. Not Crane's voice, not a child's, a man's voice, older, familiar enough to make Cade's knees want to buckle. He whispered, "No." The voice came again, closer now. "Son." Cade's mouth went numb. He pressed harder, and the door opened another inch, lantern light spilling into the space beyond. What he saw wasn't a room. It was a tunnel, cut through packed clay and reinforced with timber the way miners shored up a shaft. It sloped downward, vanishing into darkness. The air coming out of it was colder than winter shade. And there, just beyond the threshold, stood a man in a torn, dirt-streaked shirt, beard grown wild, eyes sunk deep. A scar cut across his jaw in the exact same place as Cade's. Cade's hand shook on the rifle. "That's not possible." The man's eyes glistened in the lantern light. "I've been waiting," he said softly, "for years." Above, Crane shouted, "What the hell are you doing down there?" Cade barely heard him. The man stepped forward. His hands were empty. His posture wasn't threatening. It was weary, like he'd carried something too heavy for too long. "Listen to me," the man said. "We don't have time. You have to bring them, all of them." Cade's throat tightened. "Who are you?" The man blinked, pain crossing his face. "You know who I am." Cade's eyes darted down the tunnel behind him, searching for proof, for traps, for anything that made sense. The darkness offered nothing. Behind Cade, back up the corridor, Ma Hart let out a thin, desperate sound. Crane's boots scraped again, closer to climbing down. Cade swung the lantern toward the man's face, studying every line. It was like looking at a ghost made from his own memory. The man leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper that felt like it belonged in Cade's childhood. "Cade, they're coming. And if they get that door open from their side, everything we buried comes back up." Cade stared at him, heart hammering. "What did you bury?" The man's eyes flicked past Cade, toward the corridor, toward the ladder, toward the world above. "Dry Creek," he said. "Dry Creek's real foundation." Then, from deep in the tunnel behind him, something moved. Heavy, slow, accompanied by the faint scrape of metal on stone. The man's face tightened. "We have to go. Now." And before Cade could answer, the lantern light caught something on the ground just inside the tunnel entrance. A badge, half buried in the dirt, tarnished and bent. Cade's old badge, the one he'd thrown away the night he ran. Cade's eyes stayed on the badge for a heartbeat too long. Tarnished brass. The same dent at the edge where his thumb used to worry it raw. He had thrown that badge into a river outside Abilene, watched it spin once in moonlight, then disappear. Now it lay here like it had never left him. "You planted that," Cade said, though his voice had lost its certainty. The man, his father, or something wearing his father's face, shook his head. "I couldn't plant what was already taken." From above, Crane's boots scraped again, closer, and Cade snapped back to the corridor. He could hear Crane shifting his weight at the rim, choosing angles, deciding whether to climb down or smoke them out. Cade backed toward the corridor mouth, lantern held high, rifle ready. "If you're my father, prove it." The man's gaze flicked to the lantern flame. He spoke quietly, like he didn't want the tunnel to hear him. "You used to hide behind the smokehouse when you stole pies. You weren't smart about it. Your ma would find crumbs in your shirt pocket." Cade's jaw clenched. That was true. It wasn't proof. Anyone could have heard a story. Yet the way he said it, tired, disappointed, almost fond, hit somewhere deep. The scrape of metal on stone came again from down the tunnel behind him, heavier now. The man's head turned as if listening for it the way a hunter listens for a bear in brush. "Now," Cade said, "tell me why you're here. Tell me what this is." "Later," the man insisted. "You need to bring the children and the woman." "Then we go." Cade's mind raced through the impossibilities. Carry Ma Hart down a tunnel while Crane waited at the top, while something moved in the dark behind this man. Above, Crane's voice sharpened, stripped of its mockery. "Mercer, I'm coming down, and when I do, I'm taking pieces." Cade didn't waste breath on an answer. He turned and ran back along the corridor, boots thudding on packed earth. The lantern swung, throwing shadows across the tally marks carved into the timbers. Dates, names, some scratched so hard the wood splintered. He reached Ma Hart. She was slumped more than before, eyes half-lidded. Her breathing came in shallow pulls. Cade crouched. "Ma'am, you have to move." Her lips parted. a whisper. The key. The key was for you, not for— I know, Cade said. Can you stand? She tried. Her knees buckled. Cade swore under his breath, then slid his arm under her shoulders and lifted her. She weighed less than she should have, all bone and fever. He hefted her like a sack, careful not to jolt her head. Above, a boot hit the ladder, then another. Crane was climbing down. The sound was unmistakable, wood creaking under a man's weight, slow and confident, not hurried. He believed he owned this place too. Cade moved fast, hauling Ma Hart toward the tunnel door. Behind him, the ladder creaked again, closer. Crane's voice came down the shaft, now echoing off the corridor walls. You can stop moving, Mercer. Only one way out, and I'm standing at it. Cade reached the iron-banded door and shoved it wider with his shoulder. Cold air poured over them. The man waited just inside, his face taut, eyes darting between Cade and the darkness behind him. You brought her? The man asked. Couldn't leave her, Cade snapped. You can't bring her, the man said, then swallowed the words like he hated them. But you have to. Cade set Ma Hart down just inside the threshold, propped against the timber. She groaned, eyes rolling. Cade turned back down the corridor. He had to get the kids, if they were alive. He sprinted to the shaft opening and looked up. Daylight framed the trap door like a bright wound, but the children were gone. The wash above was empty. Cade's relief lasted exactly one breath. Crane's boots were on the ladder now, halfway down, his revolver pointed below him, barrel following Cade's movement like a calm eye. He was close enough that Cade could see dust on his cuffs, the pale line of a healed burn on his knuckle. Crane smiled. Told you. Buried. Cade lifted his rifle, sighting upward. The angle was bad. Crane had cover. Cade didn't. If Cade fired and missed, Crane would put a bullet through his forehead before Cade could work the lever again. Crane's gaze flicked toward the open iron-banded door. His smile thinned. What did you find? Cade didn't answer. Crane's eyes sharpened. That door was locked. Cade's silence was enough. Crane's voice softened, dangerous. Judge Rusk is going to be real curious how you got that open. Cade took a slow step back. Go back up. Crane laughed like Cade had made a joke. You ain't in a position to give orders. Cade's mind flicked through options. He could retreat into the tunnel and shut the door, but Crane would follow or shoot. He could try to take Crane on the ladder, grab his ankle, yank him down, but Crane would fire as he fell. He needed something else. Cade's eyes darted to the corridor walls, to the candle stubs, to the supports, then to the floor where the dirt was scuffed in a dark smear. Oil. Someone had spilled lantern oil here, long ago, soaking into earth. Crane descended another rung, revolver steady. Last chance, Mercer. Put the rifle down. I don't want to kill you, but I will. Cade eased the rifle down an inch, like he was thinking about it. His left hand slid toward his belt, where a tin of matches sat in his pocket. He'd struck one earlier for the lantern. He still had them. Crane saw the movement and his eyes narrowed. Don't! Cade struck the match anyway, right there, quick as a card trick. The tiny flame flared. Crane's smile vanished. Cade flicked the match onto the floor where the oil-dark earth waited. The fire didn't roar like a bonfire. It crawled, it hissed, it spread in a thin, hungry line along the spilled oil, racing toward the ladder base and licking up the timber supports. Crane cursed and lunged upward instinctively, boots scrambling. You stupid son of a— Smoke rose fast in the tight corridor, stinging Cade's eyes. The flame climbed one support and crackled, eating dry wood. Cade didn't wait to see if the place would hold. He ran back to the tunnel door, coughing, pulling the lantern close to his chest. Behind him, Crane scrambled up the ladder, shouting. The trapdoor above slammed, then muffled pounding from the outside, frantic now. "Mercer! Mercer!" Crane bellowed through the boards. "Put it out! You hear me? Put it out!" Cade slammed the iron-banded door shut as hard as he could. The wood boomed. He drove the padlock into place with shaking hands and twisted it until it clicked. The corridor behind him filled with smoke as the fire caught more timber. The man grabbed Cade by the shoulder. "This way!" Cade yanked free. "Where are the kids?" The man's eyes flashed. "If they ran, they live. If they didn't—" "Don't!" Cade snarled. The man's face tightened. "You want to save them? You have to survive long enough to come back." From the corridor side, the padlocked door shuddered once, heat making the iron bands groan. Then another shudder, wood popping as the fire found something dry. Cade snatched the lantern up and pushed into the tunnel with the man, half dragging Ma Hart by her shoulders for the first few feet until the slope forced him to lift her again. The tunnel angled down and away, reinforced with thick timbers like a mine shaft. The ground underfoot shifted from packed dirt to hard clay, then to stone that glimmered faint under lantern light. They moved fast, breathing hard. The air grew colder and cleaner as they descended, the smoke behind them fading. Still, Cade could hear it faintly. Crackling wood, distant pounding, Crane's voice muffled by earth. Ma Hart's head lolled against Cade's shoulder. Her breath rasped. Lila, Jonah. Cade grunted, more promise than comfort. They ran. They'll be all right. He wasn't sure he believed it. The man led them through a bend where the tunnel widened. There were marks in the walls, pick scars. A vein of something dark ran through the stone like dried blood. The lantern flame fluttered as if a draft came from somewhere ahead. The scrape of metal on stone sounded again, closer this time, coming from deeper in the tunnel. Cade stopped dead. There, that. What is that? The man didn't stop. Keep moving. Cade held his ground. No, you want me to follow you into a hole built under a town run by a judge I've heard people don't talk about? You tell me what's down here. The man's shoulders sagged as if he'd been waiting for the moment Cade finally refused. He turned, lantern light carving the planes of his face into something familiar and strange at once. Dry Creek wasn't built for ranchers, the man said. It was built for men who didn't want questions. Cade stared. Questions about what? The man's eyes slid away. About the war, about contracts, about missing supplies and missing men, about debts that don't stay on paper. Cade's throat tightened. And you? I was a deputy, the man said softly. Before Rusk was Judge Rusk, before Crane wore a badge, I tried to stop it. Cade's grip on Ma Hart tightened. Stop what? The man looked past Cade, into the darkness behind them, as if expecting something to come around the bend any second. A mine, he said. A prison. A ledger. A ledger, Cade echoed. The man nodded once. Names, payments, orders. The kind of book that makes powerful men swing innocent ones just to keep it buried. Cade's mind flashed to the carved names back in the corridor. Tally marks, dates. They weren't children's scratches. They were records. Cade's voice went low. You faked your death. The man's jaw clenched. They tried to kill me. They buried me before I was dead. I dug. I crawled. I found this. Cade's eyes narrowed. Why didn't you come for me? The man's face tightened with pain. Because you were safe. Cade barked a bitter laugh. Safe? I've been running like a dog for 6 years. The man stepped closer, voice rough. Running kept you alive. The scrape came again, accompanied by a low, wet sound, like something heavy being pulled over rock. Ma Hart stirred, eyes half opening in terror. Not that. Cade felt the hair rise on his arms. He shifted, trying to see down the tunnel ahead. The lantern light reached only so far, then died into darkness. Move, the man said, suddenly urgent. Move now, Cade. Cade adjusted Ma Hart and started forward again. The tunnel narrowed. The timbers grew older, darker, stained with damp. Water dripped somewhere, steady as a clock. They reached a fork. One passage continued down, the other sloped up slightly toward a faint draft that smelled like open air. The man pointed up. That way. Exit. Cade hesitated. And the ledger? The man's eyes flicked down the lower passage. Not yet. Another scrape, louder now. A shadow shifted far below, just beyond the lantern's reach, something large enough to block what little light leaked down the slope. Cade's voice tightened. There's someone down there. The man's mouth went hard. Not someone. Cade swallowed and started up the side passage, boots slipping on damp clay. The air grew fresher. The lantern flame steadied. After 20 yards, they reached a wooden hatch set into the ceiling of the tunnel, a crude square reinforced with iron nails. The man set his shoulder into it and pushed. It didn't move. He cursed under his breath and tried again. Still nothing. Cade shifted Ma Hart. What is it? The man pressed his ear to the wood. They've barred it. Cade's stomach sank. Who? The man's eyes snapped to Cade's, sharp with fear. Rusk's men. They check these exits. They don't want anyone coming out of the ground. From behind them, down the lower passage, the dragging sound grew nearer, accompanied by a slow, rhythmic thump like a footstep, but wrong, too heavy, too measured. Cade backed a half-step, rifle rising. "Tell me what that is." The man didn't answer. He grabbed a spike from the timber wall, a thick iron wedge hammered there like a tool left behind. He jammed it into the seam of the hatch and levered hard. The wood creaked. Above, muffled voices drifted through the hatch, close enough to make out words. "Heard it burnin'. Crane's shoutin' like a stuck hog. Judge says seal it, seal all of it." The man's face tightened. He levered again. The hatch lifted an inch. A sliver of daylight sliced through, bright as a knife. Dust motes spun in it. A boot stomped on the hatch from above. The wood slammed back down, nearly pinching the man's fingers. He hissed in pain. Cade lifted his rifle toward the hatch. "Move away!" The man grabbed the barrel and pushed it down. "You shoot through that and they'll shoot back through it." Cade's eyes burned. "Then what?" The man's gaze flicked down the tunnel again, to the darkness where the dragging sound was now close enough that Cade could feel it in the soles of his boots, vibrations through stone. The man swallowed. "Then we go the other way." Cade stared. "Down." The man nodded once, grim. "To the ledger." Ma Hart's eyes fluttered open wide, sudden clarity breaking through her fog. She grabbed Cade's sleeve, nails digging. No, not there." Cade looked down at her. "Ma'am, you know what's down there." Her lips trembled. "Your pa. He made the door, so it stayed locked." She gulped air. "But they found a way from inside." Cade's gaze snapped to the man. "From inside." The man's face went pale. "They weren't supposed to be able to." The dragging sound stopped. Silence swelled in the tunnel like water rising. Cade held his breath, lantern held out, rifle ready. Then a voice came up from the darkness below, slow and calm, as if it had been listening to every word. "Mercer," it called, not Crane, someone else, someone deep, someone who sounded like he'd never needed to shout in his life. "Open the way. We've been waiting a long time to speak with you." Cade's blood ran cold. The man beside him, his father, whispered, barely audible, "That's Judge Rusk." Rusk's voice drifted up the tunnel like smoke, calm enough to make it worse. It didn't echo the way Crane's had. It carried, like the earth itself had learned to listen. Cade tightened his hold on Ma Hart. Her breath hitched, and she shook her head in small, frantic motions, as if she could shake the voice out of the stone. The man beside Cade, his father, stared down the lower passage. His face had gone rigid, as though a hand had closed around his throat. "He shouldn't be down there," he whispered. Cade kept his rifle leveled, lantern forward. "How is he talking to us from that far?" His father's eyes flicked up to the barred hatch above. "Because this whole place is built for it. Shafts, vents, speaking tubes in the timbers. They wanted to move men and move secrets. The mine was just the excuse." Rusk's voice came again, closer now, or maybe Cade's fear was pulling it nearer. "You can keep breathing dust and smoke if you like, or you can step down and talk like a reasonable man." Cade called down into the darkness. "If you're Judge Rusk, you can come up here and talk." A low chuckle answered. "I don't climb, Mr. Mercer. I've never had to." The dragging sound resumed, metal on stone, slow, steady. Cade's lantern light couldn't reach it, but he could feel it, that wrong weight traveling up the incline. His father grabbed Cade's sleeve. "We can't let him get close," Cade hissed. "You didn't tell me he was down there." "I didn't know," his father said, and Cade believed him. The fear in his eyes was too raw to be acted. "He doesn't go into the tunnels. He sends men. He sends Crane. He sends—" The dragging stopped again, nearer than before. Ma Hart's fingers clamped around Cade's wrist with surprising strength. Don't listen," she rasped. "He'll bargain. He always bargains." Cade stared into the black and felt the familiar shape of a choice closing around him. Do nothing and be crushed, or move and gamble everything. His father's voice dropped to a hiss. "We go down. We get the ledger. If we have it, he can't—" Rusk interrupted, gentle. "Cade Mercer, son of Thomas Mercer, former deputy, currently a man without a town." A soft pause. "Do you know why men like you never settle?" Cade didn't answer. "Because you carry a story you can't put down," Rusk continued. "You think if you keep moving, the story can't catch you. But stories do catch, Mr. Mercer. They catch like burrs." Cade swallowed. Rusk's words landed too close to truth. His father leaned in, urgent. He's stalling. He's buying time to get men above us and below us. If we're trapped between... A faint clink sounded behind Cade, at the iron-banded door they'd locked to block the corridor fire. Then another clink. Metal tapping metal, not wood popping, not fire crackling. A deliberate test of the padlock from the corridor side. Cade's stomach tightened. Crane, his father's eyes widened. He can't... The clink came again, sharper. A keyring, maybe, or a tool. Rusk's voice floated up, almost amused. You have company above and you have company behind. You see? Life simplifies when you remove options. Cade's mind snapped through the geometry. Barred hatch overhead, Rusk below, Crane behind, working the lock. They were a coin about to be pressed flat. Cade raised his voice into the darkness. You want to talk? Tell your men to back off. Tell Crane to stop. Rusk laughed softly. Crane isn't my man. Crane is the thing that happens when you feed certain appetites too long. A pause. But I can promise you this. If you come down, the children live. Cade's head jerked. Where are they? Rusk's voice didn't change. Safe. For the moment. Ma Hart let out a small broken sound, halfway between sob and curse. Liar, she breathed. Cade felt his pulse in his fingertips. He looked at his father. Did he take them? His father's jaw worked. I don't know. Safe, Rusk repeated, is a flexible word, but I'm a man of agreements. Behind them, the padlock clink turned into a scrape, as if someone was inserting something into the keyway. Cade turned slightly, lantern swinging. The iron bands on the door shivered with the heat behind it. Crane's voice came faintly through the wood, warped by smoke and distance. Mercer, you ain't going nowhere. I got your air. I got your light. I got your... His words dissolved into coughing, but then came back, angry and ragged. I'm opening this, you bastard, Cade's father muttered. The fire should have kept him busy longer. It didn't, Cade said. Rusk's voice purred up the tunnel. You see? The world refuses to be tidy, so we adapt. The dragging sound below them shifted direction, like whatever was down there had turned and was coming up the slope toward them. Cade's father backed a step, eyes locked on the darkness. It's moving. Cade tightened his grip on the rifle. What is it? His father swallowed. Not a man, Ma Hart whispered. It's the box. Cade frowned, not taking his eyes off the passage. What box? Ma Hart's voice thinned. The one they carried. Chained. When they brought the first gold out. Rusk's voice came, closer still. Mrs. Hart, you always did have a talent for drama. The lantern flame flickered. A cold draft pushed against it from below, as if something large displaced air. Then the darkness at the bottom of the slope moved, and Cade's lantern light finally caught a shape. Not a person. A wooden crate, heavy and long, reinforced with iron straps, dragged forward on a rough sled. Chains wrapped it like a spider web. The chains were taut as if something inside pressed against them. The crate moved by itself, no hands, no visible rope. Yet it came forward in small, steady jerks, wood groaning against stone. Cade's throat went tight. He kept the rifle trained, but he didn't know where to aim. You couldn't shoot a box. His father's voice shook. It shouldn't be able to move. The crate stopped halfway up the slope, resting there as if it had reached the limit of what it could do without permission. A thin, metallic sound came from inside, like a fingernail tapping iron. Once, twice. Then a voice, muffled by wood and chains, spoke from within the crate. Tom, it said, and Cade's father flinched like he'd been struck. You left us. Cade's eyes snapped to his father. Who is that? His father's lips parted, but no sound came. Rusk answered, voice smooth as oil. That, he said, is the debt your father couldn't pay. The crate shifted again, chains tightening, iron straps creaking. The muffled voice inside grew clearer, forcing itself through gaps in wood like breath through teeth. Cade, it said. Cade's blood went cold. He had never told anyone his name down here. He hadn't even believed this place existed an hour ago. Behind them, the padlock at the iron-banded door clicked, a clean, final sound. Crane had opened it. Smoke and heat poured into the tunnel behind Cade, and in that wash of heat came the unmistakable scrape of boots on stone. Crane's voice, close now, delighted and vicious. There you are. Cade stood between two threats, a deputy with a gun and a moving chained crate that spoke his name, with Judge Rusk's calm voice floating somewhere below like he owned the dark. "Because it learns you," the crate gave. "Because it learns you." The crate gave one slow, heavy jerk forward, and inside, something laughed, quiet, intimate, like it was inches from Cade's ear. Crane's boots scraped closer, and the heat of the corridor fire rolled in with him, carrying soot and the sharp stink of burned oil. Cade didn't turn his head at first. If he turned, he'd have to choose which nightmare to face first. Crane chose for him. A revolver cocked behind Cade, the sound crisp and final. "Drop the rifle," Crane said. "Kick it away, slow." Cade kept the barrel pointed down the slope toward the chained crate. The crate sat there like a patient animal, iron straps biting into swollen wood, chains stretched tight enough to sing. The tapping inside stopped, replaced by a soft shifting, like someone adjusting their weight in a coffin. Rusk's voice floated up again, pleased. "Deputy Crane, always punctual when there's blood in the air." Crane's laugh was thin. "Judge, I didn't know you were down in the dirt today." "I go where I'm needed," Rusk replied. Crane stepped into the lantern light. His coat was dusted gray with ash, and there was a bright smear on his cheek where sweat had cut a clean path through soot. His pale eyes flicked from Cade to Cade's father, then to Ma Hart slumped against the timber. "Well," Crane said, smiling at Cade's father as if greeting an old friend. "Look at that. The dead man walks." Cade's father's hands clenched and unclenched. "Hollis." Crane tilted his head. "Tom, you look like hell. Smell like it too." Cade's father didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on Crane's gun, calculating angles the way Cade had, except with the extra weight of knowing how men like Crane moved. Cade spoke without turning. "You shot one of the kids." Crane's smile widened just enough to show teeth. "I shot at a shadow that ran." "If it screamed, that's on it." Jonah's scream in Cade's head turned into a thin ringing. He forced his voice steady. "Where are they?" Crane shrugged. "If they're smart, they're dead in a ditch. If they're dumb, they'll be back at the trap door by nightfall crying for their ma. Either way, not my problem." Ma Hart made a sound like a strangled breath. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw Crane, her face tightened with a hatred so sharp it almost looked like strength. "You," she whispered. Crane stepped closer to her, keeping his revolver trained on Cade. "Mrs. Hart, still clinging. You're a stubborn thing." Rusk's voice came, calm as ever. "Bring them down, Crane. I'd like to speak where we can hear ourselves without all this scraping." The crate answered Rusk's mention with a slow groan. It jerked forward half an inch. The chains tightened with a metallic whine. Crane's eyes flicked to it, and for the first time, his confidence hit a snag. "What the hell is that?" Cade's father spoke, voice low. "Leave it alone." Crane's gaze sharpened. "I asked you, corpse," Rusk answered, almost indulgent. "It's an instrument, deputy, a reminder, something that makes men choose honesty." Crane snorted, forcing his swagger back. "Don't need instruments to make men honest. I got this." He lifted the revolver slightly. Cade's finger tightened on his rifle trigger, then eased. One shot might drop Crane, but in this tunnel a shot would also start a slaughter Cade couldn't finish. Rusk had men. Rusk had exits. And Cade had Ma Hart and a father he didn't trust. The muffled voice inside the crate came again, soft, amused. "Hollis." Crane froze. His eyes flicked back to the crate like it had spat. The voice continued, intimate as breath. "You remember the river?" Crane's face twitched. For a moment the practiced smile slipped, revealing something pale underneath, like fear that hadn't seen daylight in years. He recovered fast. "Judge, you got rats in boxes talking nonsense," Rusk chuckled. "It remembers you, deputy. Isn't that charming?" Crane's knuckles whitened on his revolver. He stepped closer to Cade, using Cade as a shield between himself and the crate without meaning to. Cade caught it, noted it, filed it. "Drop the rifle," Crane repeated, but his voice had lost a thread of certainty. Cade turned his head just enough to see him with one eye. "If I drop it, you'll shoot me anyway." Crane's smile tried to return. "Maybe. Depends how you behave." Cade's father moved a half step, almost imperceptible, shifting his weight so he could lunge if Crane blinked. Cade felt it and held still, not giving Crane a reason to fire. Rusk's voice rose slightly, not loud but commanding. Enough posturing. Cade Mercer, you want the children alive. Deputy Crane, you want to keep breathing. Thomas Mercer, you want— A pause, as if Rusk tasted the words. Redemption, perhaps. Cade's father's jaw tightened. Rusk continued. So we'll do this cleanly. Bring the lantern, bring the key, bring the woman, and come down to the ledger room. We'll speak like civilized men. Crane flicked his revolver toward Cade's father. Ledger room? Cade's father's eyes stayed on Rusk's darkness. You don't know what you're standing in. Crane barked a laugh that sounded forced. I know I'm standing above you with a gun. The crate shifted again, and this time it dragged itself forward a full foot, sled grinding against stone. The chain link snapped tight with a sharp clank. Ma Hart whimpered, no, as if the crate were a storm cloud rolling in. Cade's rifle barrel tracked the crate instinctively, though he still didn't know what that meant. The muffled laughter inside subsided into a low murmur, like someone humming behind a wall. Crane's eyes widened. It moved. Rusk's voice was almost tender. It wants to be heard. Crane lifted his revolver toward the crate without thinking. Cade snapped, don't. Too late. Crane fired. The shot exploded in the tunnel, deafening. The bullet struck the crate's iron strap with a bright spark and a metallic scream. The strap shuddered. The chain links jumped. For one heartbeat, everything went still. Then the crate convulsed. Not like wood shifting, like something inside throwing itself against the walls with purpose. The whole box lurched, sled gouging the stone. Chains snapped taut, vibrating so hard they blurred in lantern light. A sound came from inside, half scream, half laugh, as if pain and delight were the same thing. Crane staggered back, gun still raised, his mouth open. Rusk's voice became sharper for the first time. Deputy, you are not to— The crate slammed again, and one iron strap bent outward with a groan, as if a giant hand inside had pressed it from within. Cade's father lunged. He hit Crane's gun arm hard, driving it up toward the ceiling. Another shot cracked into timber, splintering wood above their heads. Cade threw himself forward at the same time, ramming his shoulder into Crane's chest. Crane stumbled, but he was strong and mean. He swung the revolver down like a club, catching Cade across the side of the head. White flashed. Cade tasted copper. Cade fired his rifle on instinct, not at Crane's body, too close, but into the ground by Crane's feet. The blast kicked dirt and stone into Crane's face. Crane recoiled, blinded for a second, and Cade used that second to wrench the revolver away. The gun clattered against stone and slid toward the slope, toward the crate. Cade reached, but the crate jerked forward again, and the gun slid out of reach, disappearing into the dark beyond the lantern's edge. Crane wiped his eyes, snarling, and pulled a knife from his boot. Cade raised the rifle again, aiming center mass now. Crane stopped mid-step, chest heaving, knife held low. The crate made a slow dragging movement, coming closer, the sled scraping louder. The chains vibrated in a steady rhythm, almost like breathing. Cade's father grabbed Cade's shoulder. Don't shoot him, he hissed. Cade's eyes snapped to him. Why not? Because Rusk wants him alive, his father said, and if you kill Crane, Rusk will kill the kids for spite. Rusk's voice confirmed it, calm again. Thomas is correct. Violence is a language, and I speak it fluently. Put the rifle down, Cade. Cade's hands shook, not from fear of Crane, from the crushing certainty that every move here had already been measured by someone who'd built the tunnel. Ma Hart's breath turned into short sobs. My babies, she whispered. Where are my babies? Rusk answered without warmth. They're where they need to be. Crane's eyes flicked between Cade and the crate, calculating. His swagger was gone now. Judge, he said, voice tight, I don't like this. Rusk's reply was soft. You don't have to like it. You only have to obey. Crane swallowed. The knife trembled slightly in his hand. Cade's father stepped between Cade and Crane, palms out, talking to Cade without taking his eyes off Rusk's darkness. We go down, he said. We get the ledger, then we get out. That's the only path. Cade spat blood to the side. And the crate? His father's voice lowered to a whisper. We don't look at it. We don't talk to it. We don't give it names. The muffled voice inside the crate whispered, as if hearing him perfectly. Tom. His father flinched, jaw tightening. Cade stared at him. You do know what it is. His father swallowed hard. Later. Cade's mind screamed at the word later, but later was all he was getting. He lowered the rifle slightly, not surrender, not peace, just an angle of survival. "Rusk," he called down, "you want us to come down? Tell me one thing first, the children, are they alive?" Rusk paused, as if considering how much truth to spend. "4 are." Ma Hart's scream tore out of her, raw and animal. She tried to rise and collapsed, clawing at the dirt. Cade's vision narrowed. Which one isn't? Rusk's voice stayed calm. "That depends on how quickly you stop wasting my time." Cade's hands tightened until his knuckles ached. He forced his voice steady through clenched teeth. "We're coming." Crane exhaled, a shaky sound that wasn't relief. It was dread. He took a step back, then another, as if he wanted distance from both Cade and the crate. Rusk's voice softened again, satisfied. "Good. Bring the lantern, and Cade, leave the rifle. No one brings rifles into the ledger room." Cade hesitated. His father leaned close. "He's right," he whispered. "In there, a rifle won't help you." "That's not reassuring," Cade muttered. "You want reassuring," his father said, eyes hard. "Go back up and die in the smoke." Cade's jaw clenched. He slid the rifle strap off his shoulder and set it on the stone, careful, controlled. He kept his body between it and Crane. Rusk's voice drifted up. "Now, down the slope, slowly." Cade took the lantern. His father grabbed Ma Hart under one arm, Cade under the other, and between them they half-carried her toward the incline. The crate waited just off to the side of the slope, chains still humming faintly from the bullet strike. Cade kept his eyes on the ground, refusing to meet the place where the voice came from. As they passed, the crate whispered, soft as a lover, "Cade." Cade's teeth clenched so hard his jaw ached. He did not look. He did not answer. Crane followed a few paces behind, knife still in hand, breathing fast. Cade could hear the scrape of his boots and the wetness in his throat, like he was trying not to cough from smoke. They descended. The tunnel widened as they went down, and the timbers changed, older, heavier, blackened with age. The air grew colder. The lantern flame burned steadier, as if the darkness down here had learned to feed it. At the bottom of the slope, a doorway opened into a chamber cut from stone. Not a natural cave, straight walls, squared corners, a floor leveled by chisels. On the far side, an oil lamp burned bright on a table, already lit, as if someone had been waiting a long time. Judge Rusk stood beside that table. He wasn't what Cade expected, not enormous, not scarred, not some devil with a face made of violence. He was neat, clean shirt, vest, sleeves rolled like a man about to do paperwork, gray hair combed carefully, a gold watch chain across his waist. His eyes were the only thing wrong. They were pale and flat, like river stones, and they watched Cade the way a man watches weather. "Mr. Mercer," Rusk said, voice warm now that he was in sight. "Thomas, Mrs. Hart." His gaze slid to Crane. "Deputy." Crane shifted, trying to find his old stance. "Judge," Rusk gestured to the table. "Set her there." Cade and his father lowered Ma Hart onto the stone floor beside the table because there was no chair, no bed, nothing for comfort. The table held papers, ink, and a thick leather-bound book. The ledger. Cade's pulse jumped. He couldn't stop his eyes from locking on it. Rusk noticed and smiled faintly. "Yes, that." He rested 2 fingers on the ledger's cover like it was a pet. "Men have killed for less." Cade's father's voice came out rough. "Where are the children?" Rusk didn't look up. "In town." Ma Hart choked out a sob. "You said—" Rusk lifted a hand, silencing her without touching. "They're not in the jail. They're not in the cage. They're not hurt further." He looked at Cade then, finally giving him full attention. "One is missing. That's a separate matter." Cade's fists clenched. "Missing how?" Rusk's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Frontier life is full of missing. Men go into rivers and don't come out. Wagons leave and don't arrive. Children wander." Cade stepped forward before he could stop himself. "Bring them here." Rusk's gaze sharpened, polite but warning. "You are in no position to issue demands." Cade's father put a hand on Cade's chest, holding him back. "What do you want, Rusk?" Rusk sighed, as if the question were tedious. "I want the tunnels quiet. I want the stories dead. I want Dry Creek to remain Dry Creek." Cade's father's jaw worked. "Then let the family go." Rusk looked at him with mild curiosity. "Thomas, you know better than anyone. Families talk. Grief talks loudest. Cade's gaze flicked around the chamber. There were shelves carved into the stone, holding bundles of letters tied with twine, small pouches, a few rusted tools, and something that made his stomach twist, a row of tin tags, each stamped with a number, like inventory. Rusk saw Cade looking. "We're an organized town," he said lightly. Cade forced his eyes back to the ledger. "You kept records?" Rusk nodded. "I kept control." Cade's father's voice dropped. "You kept bodies." Rusk didn't deny it. He merely opened the ledger with care. The pages were thick, the ink old. Names and figures marched down the lines like a slow army. Rusk tapped a place with his finger. "Thomas Mercer, paid twice, once to silence you, once to bury you." Cade's father's face went gray. "I never took your money." Rusk's finger moved to another line. "No, your sheriff did, the one who wore your badge after you." He glanced at Cade. "Badges move around, money moves around, but responsibility? That sticks." Cade's chest tightened. "My badge is down here." Rusk smiled faintly. "Everything returns to its proper place." Crane shifted, uneasy, eyes darting. "Judge, I don't like being in here. His gaze flicked upward, as if he could hear the crate even through stone. "The box is moving." Rusk's eyes flashed once, cold. "The box will stay where I tell it." Crane swallowed and fell quiet. Rusk closed the ledger halfway and leaned on the table. "Here is what will happen. Cade Mercer, you will take responsibility for a crime you did not commit." Cade stared. "What crime?" Rusk's voice stayed gentle. "You will confess to the arson in the tunnels. You will confess to shooting Deputy Crane. You will confess to killing the missing child." Ma Hart tried to sit up, horror on her face. Rusk didn't look at her. "And then, because Dry Creek is merciful, you will be hanged in the square, publicly, cleanly. The town will feel safe again." Cade's vision narrowed to a tunnel of rage. "And the rest of them?" Rusk's eyes slid to Cade's father. "Thomas will go back into the ground where he belongs. Mrs. Hart will be sent west to her sister with a warning. The remaining children will be absorbed." "Absorbed," Cade repeated, voice thick. Rusk nodded. "Apprenticed, housed, taught manners. They will forget your face in time." Cade felt his hands shaking. Not fear. A desire to tear the whole chamber apart with his bare hands. His father spoke, voice hoarse. "You're insane." Rusk's smile returned, small. "I'm practical." Cade stepped closer to the table, eyes on the ledger. "And if I refuse?" Rusk's expression didn't change. "Then I will open the box." Silence hit the chamber like a physical thing. Crane's breath caught audibly. Ma Hart began to sob again, quiet and helpless. Cade's father went rigid. "Don't." Rusk's fingers slid to a small iron key on the table, different from the padlock key. This one was blackened, old, and hung on a short length of chain. Cade stared at it. "That key?" Rusk nodded. "The box's collar." He looked at Cade with calm certainty. "It is hungry, Mr. Mercer, not for flesh, for names, for confession, for acknowledgement." Cade forced his voice steady. "You think that thing is on your side?" Rusk's eyes glinted. "It is on the side of debt," Cade's father whispered, barely audible. "He can't control it anymore." Rusk heard him anyway. He smiled, almost fond. "Thomas, you said the same thing 6 years ago." Cade's mind snapped through the pieces. The tally marks in the corridor, the tin tags, the crate that spoke, the way Crane flinched at the river mention, the way Rusk said debt like a religion. Cade looked at Ma Hart. "Your child, the missing one. He took them for this." Ma Hart's eyes were swollen with tears, but she nodded once, tiny. "Jonah," she whispered. "If Jonah's gone." Cade's throat tightened. He had heard the scream. He hadn't known which child it belonged to. Now the name landed in him like a rock. Rusk's voice cut through, smooth. "So, decide. Confession or the box." Cade's gaze dropped to the ledger again. The book sat there, heavy, real. Proof. The kind of proof that could burn a town to ash if it ever reached daylight. Cade's father's voice trembled. "Cade, don't—" Cade cut him off, eyes still on the ledger. "If I take that book, can I trade it?" Rusk's expression warmed slightly, as if pleased Cade was finally thinking like a man in his world. "You can try." Cade nodded slowly, like he was agreeing, like he was surrendering. He stepped closer to the table. His hand hovered over the ledger. Rusk watched him, calm, confident, already tasting victory. Cade's fingers touched the leather cover, and in that exact moment, from somewhere far above, faint at first, then clearer, came a pounding on wood and a child's voice screaming through the tunnels, torn raw with panic. May, it's me! Please! Ma's heart jerked like she'd been shocked. Jonah! Rusk's eyes narrowed. The pounding grew frantic, close enough to rattle dust from the chamber ceiling. A boy's sobbing voice, hoarse and desperate, pushed through whatever vents and shafts carried sound down here. They got Lila! He's making her! May! The words broke into choking cries. Crane's face drained of color. He stared at Rusk. Judge, that's not... Rusk lifted a hand, silencing him instantly. His calm voice returned, but sharper now. You see? Stories don't stay buried, they climb. Cade's hand tightened on the ledger. Rusk's fingers closed around the blackened key. And the oil lamp flame on the table suddenly flickered hard, bending sideways as if something enormous had just inhaled somewhere in the dark. Rusk's fingers tightened around the blackened key, and the tiny chain attached to it clinked softly against the table, a sound too small to carry the weight it did. The pounding above came again, wood shuddering, a child's heel or fist hammering a hatch. May, please, don't let him! The words turned into a cough, wet and choking. Then Jonah's voice, ragged with terror, forced itself back through. He's got Lila. He's making her tell. The sentence snapped off like someone had put a hand over a mouth. Ma's heart surged forward from the floor with a strength that didn't belong to her broken body. Cade caught her before she fell, but her fingers clawed for the air anyway, reaching for a child she couldn't see. Jonah, she screamed, voice cracking. Baby, where are you? Rusk didn't look at her. He watched the oil lamp as it flickered sideways, then steadied. His expression suggested irritation, like a man whose paperwork had been smudged. Thomas, Rusk said quietly, you always failed to keep your house in order. Cade's father stared at the ceiling, face gone slack with horror. That boy is in the upper shaft, he whispered. He found the old vent line. Crane's eyes were wide, shining. He kept glancing toward the stone doorway as if expecting the crate to crawl in on chains and answers. Judge, he said, voice brittle. I didn't agree to this. You agreed the day you took your first coin and called it duty, Rusk replied. Then his pale eyes slid to Cade. The noise is inconvenient. We will end it. Rusk lifted the blackened key. Cade's hand was still on the ledger, fingers sunk into the worn leather. He felt the book's weight and wanted it in his arms like a shield. He forced his voice steady. If you open it, you can't close it again. Rusk's mouth curved faintly. Mr. Mercer, I have closed things you've never even seen. The lamp flame bent hard again, as if responding to the key moving through the air. The shadows along the chamber walls thickened, stretching toward Rusk's hand. Ma's heart began to sob in small, broken bursts. Please, he's just a boy. Rusk didn't spare her a glance. Boys become men. Men become problems. Cade's father stepped forward, palms open. Rusk, listen, you don't need to do this. The box... Rusk's eyes sharpened. Do not speak to me about what I need. He turned the key once in the air, like a habit. Somewhere far above, the pounding stopped. Silence fell so sudden it felt like the tunnels had swallowed Jonah whole. Ma's heart went rigid, breath caught in her throat. Jonah, she whispered, barely audible. Jonah, answer me. No answer came. Crane swallowed hard. What did you do? Rusk set the key down gently beside the ledger, as if placing a pen. Nothing, he said. I simply reminded him what happens when you shout into places meant for quiet. Cade's chest tightened, a hot pressure building behind his ribs. He looked from Rusk to the ledger to the key and felt the trap closing tighter. Rusk rested both hands on the table, leaning forward like a man negotiating a fair deal. We're done with distractions. Cade, confess and your death is quick. Refuse, and I will use the box to pull confession from all of you. One by one, Crane's voice cracked. Judge, I did what you asked. I kept order. Rusk's gaze slid to him, flat and cold. Hollis, you are not part of this conversation. Crane's face twitched, humiliation and fear mixing into something ugly. His hand tightened on his knife. I'm part of every conversation in Dry Creek. Rusk smiled thinly. That is why you are still alive. Cade felt his father's hand on his arm, a warning grip. Cade, his father murmured, don't rush him. Watch his hands. Cade watched. Rusk's hands were calm, too calm. But Cade noticed something else. The leather strap securing the ledger to the table's edge. Not a chain, not a lock, just a strap with a brass buckle. Like someone expected the book to be grabbed. Rusk wanted it stolen. The realization landed cold. This wasn't just about keeping secrets. This was about baiting someone into taking the ledger so it could become a noose. Cade slid his fingers under the ledger's cover anyway, testing its weight. The strap held it tight. Rusk saw the movement and didn't stop him. His eyes seemed to brighten, almost pleased. Go on, Rusk said softly. Take it. Be the hero you've been pretending you aren't. Ma Hart's shaking fingers clutched Cade's sleeve. Don't, she begged. He wants you dead. Cade didn't answer. His eyes were on the lamp. The oil lamp sat on the table's far side, flame steady again, glass chimney smudged. But the flame wasn't the only light in the room. There was a faint glow coming from a narrow crack in the stone wall behind Rusk, like daylight leaking through. Cade's gaze fixed on it, a seam, a hidden door, a ventilation slit, an exit. Rusk followed Cade's eyes, and for the first time, something like impatience flashed across his face. Cade's father noticed too. His eyes narrowed. That wall, he whispered, that wasn't open before. Rusk's voice remained smooth. Thomas, stop trying to solve architecture. You were never good at it. Crane's gaze darted to the seam, and his lips parted. He saw it too. A way out. A way to stop being the man trapped in the dirt. His fear sharpened into hunger. Cade made his choice in a blink. He shoved Ma Hart's hand off his sleeve gently, then reached across the table, not for the ledger, but for the ink bottle. Rusk's brows lifted a fraction, the first crack in his composure. What? Cade flung the ink straight into Rusk's face. Black liquid splashed across Rusk's eyes and cheek, dripping into his collar. Rusk recoiled, a startled sound escaping him, more anger than pain. In the same motion, Cade snatched the oil lamp by its base and hurled it at the stone seam behind Rusk. Glass shattered, oil sprayed, flame leapt, fire blossomed along the crack in a sudden bright tongue, licking into whatever space was behind the wall. Rusk shouted, furious now. You idiot! Cade didn't wait. He lunged for the ledger strap, ripping at the buckle with both hands. The leather fought him, then gave. The brass buckle snapped open. He grabbed the ledger and yanked it free. The moment it left the table, the chamber changed. A low vibration rolled through the stone floor, subtle at first, like distant thunder. The oil lamp fire hissed louder, and the shadows along the walls stretched toward the ledger as if reaching. Rusk wiped ink from his eyes with one hand, blinking hard. His other hand went straight for the blackened key. Cade saw it and moved. He slammed the ledger into Rusk's hand, knocking the key off the table. It skittered across stone with a metallic rattle, sliding toward the chamber's corner. Crane sprang for it. Cade's father sprang too. They collided, hard, shoulder to shoulder, both men scrambling in the dust. Crane's knife flashed as he swung low, catching Cade's father across the forearm. Blood spilled dark on stone. Cade's father grunted but didn't stop. He drove his elbow into Crane's jaw, then dove again for the key. Crane kicked him in the ribs and both of them rolled, fighting like animals. Rusk recovered his posture with frightening speed. Ink streaked his face, but his voice was clear as he barked, Mercer, put the ledger down! Cade backed away, ledger pressed to his chest like a shield, eyes on the burning seam. The fire had spread into the crack, and now daylight showed brighter through it, a thin wedge of pale light opening as if the wall itself were separating. An exit. Rusk saw it too, and his face tightened. Thomas, he snapped, kill him. Cade's father, bleeding, looked up at Rusk like he'd been slapped. No, Rusk's voice dropped, venomous. You owe me. Cade's father's eyes flashed. I owed you once, not again. Crane snarled, spitting blood, and made a final lunge for the key. Cade's father got it first. His bloody fingers closed around the blackened iron, and the moment he touched it, he froze. His whole body went rigid, as if a wire had gone taut through his spine. Cade's stomach dropped. Pa? His father's eyes lifted slowly, not toward Cade, but toward the darkness beyond the chamber, toward the tunnels where the crate waited. The shadows in the room deepened. A sound came, not from above, not from behind, but from beneath the floor. Chains shifting, iron dragging. Rusk's lips curved in a calm smile again, ink and all. There, you see? The key chooses its holder. Cade's father's mouth trembled. His voice came out wrong, like it belonged to someone older. It knows me. Rusk nodded. It remembers debt. Cade backed another step toward the burning seam. The gap in the stone had widened enough now that cool air poured through, fresh and real, smelling like sage and night. He could hear voices beyond it, men shouting, hurried, confused. Rusk's people reacting to fire and smoke. Ma Hart tried to crawl toward Cade, dragging herself by her elbows. "My kids," she sobbed. "Please." Cade's heart hammered. He looked at her, then at the seam, then at his father, holding the key like it was burning him from the inside. Rusk pointed at Cade with an ink-stained finger. "Give me the ledger, and I will return the children. All of them." Cade's voice shook with rage. "You just said 4. Rusk's smile didn't change. "I said what I needed to say." Cade's fingers tightened on the ledger's spine. He could run. He could escape with proof. But if he ran, the children died. Ma Hart would die. His father would be swallowed back into the ground by a key that made the air feel heavier. Cade's father turned his head slowly toward Cade. His eyes were wet, terrified, and in them, Cade saw the truth. His father hadn't been hiding from Rusk all these years. He'd been keeping himself between Rusk and something worse. His father whispered, strained, "Cade, don't let him have it." Rusk's voice sharpened. "Thomas." Cade's father's hand trembled, and the keychain around the blackened iron began to vibrate softly, as if responding to a heartbeat. Then, from the tunnel behind the chamber, the chained crate's muffled voice slid into the room like cold fog. "Tom," it whispered, "open." Cade's father's lips parted as if the word were being pulled out of him. Cade lunged. He grabbed his father's wrist with both hands and tried to pry the key free. The moment he touched the key, a shock of cold ran up Cade's arms and into his chest, so sharp his breath cut off. Images flashed behind his eyes, river water black at night, a lantern bobbing, men screaming, iron chains sinking, a child's hand slipping under the surface. Cade staggered, still gripping his father. Rusk watched, satisfied. "It shows you," he murmured. "It teaches." Cade fought the cold, clenched his jaw, and yanked hard. The key tore free. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the chamber lamps, firelight and daylight, both dimmed as if something enormous had leaned close to the world and blocked it. Rusk's calm finally cracked. His eyes widened. "No!" The stone floor trembled. The sound of chains surged up the tunnel louder and faster, no longer patient. Ma Hart cried out, pressing herself flat to the stone. Crane froze mid-breath, staring toward the tunnel mouth as if he'd seen a ghost step into view. Cade held the key in his fist and it burned cold. The crate's voice rose, no longer muffled, clearer now, as if the box were right at the doorway. "OPEN, it said, each letter spoken like a nail driven into wood. And at the same time, the burning seam in the wall split wider with a loud crack, revealing the outside night, stars, sage, and men running with torches. Rusk stepped toward Cade, both hands reaching, abandoning pretense. "Give it to me." Cade looked at the key, then at the open gap to freedom, then at Ma Hart. He made a decision he knew would cost him. He flung the blackened key through the crack into the night. The key arced through the crack in the stone and vanished into the night. For one breath, the chamber went still, like the tunnels themselves were stunned that Cade would throw away the only piece of control any of them had ever held. Then, the world underneath Dry Creek woke up. A sound rolled through the floorboards of the earth, chains surging, iron dragged hard across stone, wood groaning as if a giant hand had gripped the mine supports and squeezed. The shadows in the chamber lunged toward the tunnel mouth, drawn like smoke into a draft. Rusk stopped reaching. His ink-streaked face tightened, and for the first time, Cade saw real fear in him, clean and sharp. "You fool," Rusk whispered. Crane backed away from the tunnel opening, palms up as if he could calm whatever was coming. Judge, do something." Rusk's eyes snapped to him. "Shut up!" Cade shoved the ledger under his arm and grabbed Ma Hart by the shoulders. "Up!" he barked. "Move!" She tried to rise, collapsed, tried again. Cade hauled her, half dragging her toward the crack in the wall where cool night air poured in. Outside, silhouettes ran past the opening, men with torches, shouting orders over the crackle of fire. One stopped, saw the gap and shouted something Cade couldn't make out. Another raised a rifle toward the opening, then hesitated when he saw women and blood and a judge covered in ink. Cade's father stood frozen in the center of the chamber, empty-handed now. His chest rose and fell too fast. His eyes stayed locked on the tunnel mouth. "Pa!" Cade shouted. His father didn't answer. It was like the tunnel had him by the spine. From the darkness beyond the doorway, a low voice came, not a whisper anymore, not muffled by wood. It was in the open air of the chamber now, thick and close. "You threw it," the voice said, almost curious. "You threw the collar." The temperature dropped. Cade's breath fogged faintly in lantern light. The tunnel mouth darkened, not because the lantern failed, but because something stepped into the edge of its glow and blocked it. Cade's eyes refused to focus on the shape at first, like his mind was trying to save him. Then it did, and he understood why his father had told him not to look too long. It wasn't a man. It wore the idea of a man the way a scarecrow wore clothes, close enough at a distance to fool you, wrong up close, tall, shoulders too square, arms too long. Something under its skin moved like water under ice. Chains hung from it, not wrapped tight anymore, trailing and clinking as it walked, as if the chains were part of it. Iron links scraped the stone with every step, leaving sparks. And where its face should have been was something like a mask, wood grain and iron seams, a suggestion of eyes that were nothing but darkness. Crane made a choking sound and stumbled backward. "No," he breathed. "No, no, no!" Rusk's voice snapped, sharper than a whip. "Hollis, stand your ground!" Crane shook his head violently, eyes wide and wet. "You said it was bound. You said it couldn't—" The thing tilted its head toward Crane, slow, deliberate. "You remember the river," it said, and the words weren't spoken so much as pressed into the room. "You remember the weight." Crane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His knife slipped from his fingers and clattered on stone. The thing took one step toward him. Crane turned and ran for the crack in the wall, shoving past Ma Hart hard enough to make her cry out. Cade caught her before she hit the stone, rage flaring through him. Crane lunged through the opening into the night, shouting for men outside. "Move! Get back! Get back!" Torches bobbed, men shouting questions. A rifle shot cracked outside, wild, panicked, followed by screams as people scattered away from the opening. Rusk didn't move. He stood by the table, eyes locked on the thing, jaw clenched as if he could still command it by force of habit. "You will return," Rusk said, voice steady but strained. "You will go back into the dark." The thing's head turned toward Rusk, and the chamber seemed to shrink around that attention. "You used the collar," it said. "You called it debt. You fed me names." Rusk's nostrils flared. "You were an instrument." The thing stepped closer, chains dragging, sparks jumping. "I was hunger," it replied. "You were the hand that opened the pantry." Cade shoved Ma Hart toward the opening. "Go," he hissed. "Out, now." Ma Hart looked back into the chamber, eyes wild. "Thomas," Cade's father finally moved. He took a step toward the thing, not away. His hands were empty, palms open like a man walking into confession. "Tom," the thing said, almost gently. Cade's father's voice came out rough. "I'm here." Cade's stomach dropped. "Pa, don't." His father didn't look at him. "Cade, take the book. Get them out. If the ledger reaches daylight, Dry Creek dies clean instead of rotting forever." Cade's throat tightened. "Come with us." His father's shoulders sagged. "I can't." He swallowed hard. "It followed me because I opened it. It stays hungry because I kept feeding it with silence." Rusk's eyes snapped to Thomas, fury burning through fear. "You don't get to decide that." Thomas turned his head slightly, and Cade saw tears on his father's face, shining in the lantern light. "You decided it the day you put a town on top of a grave and called it law." The thing reached out one long hand, and the chains on its arms slid forward like living rope. Rusk stepped back finally, and his heel struck the table. "Burn the whole mine." The thing paused. "Burn the whole mine." The thing paused, tilted its head. "Burning doesn't erase debt," it said. Outside, men shouted again. Cade saw torchlights swing past the crack. Someone yelled, "Judge, we can't hold him back," Crane's voice answered, frantic, high. "Shut it! Shut the hole!" Cade hauled Ma Hart through the opening into the night. The cold air hit his face like a slap. He stumbled onto dirt and sage, stars overhead, torches in motion all around. Men backed away from the crack, eyes fixed on the stone seam as if expecting the earth to vomit something out. Ma Hart fell to her knees, clawing at Cade's coat. "My children," she sobbed. "Where are they?" Cade's mind snapped back to the missing voices, to Jonah's scream cut off mid-word. He looked toward townlights in the distance, Dry Creek's lanterns, warm and cruel. Rusk's men were out here, but not in a line. They were scattered, confused, some aiming rifles at the opening, others at Cade, at Ma Hart, at each other. Cade lifted the ledger high with one hand. "This is Judge Rusk's ledger," he shouted into the chaos. "It names every payment, every body, every lie." A few men froze. Even in torchlight, Cade saw the way fear shifted on their faces. Not fear of Cade, fear of what the book meant. From inside the chamber, Rusk's voice carried through the crack, sharp and controlled. "Shoot him." A rifle lifted toward Cade. Before the man could fire, the ground under the opening bucked. Not a tremor, a shove from below. Stone cracked louder, dust blasted out. The torches flared as air rushed from the tunnel like a giant breath. Men stumbled back, coughing, eyes wide. Cade's gaze snapped to the opening. In the crack, for one flashing moment, he saw his father's face, straining, jaw clenched, both hands braced against stone as if he were holding the world shut with his body. Thomas shouted, voice ripping itself raw. "Run!" Then the opening collapsed inward with a violent crunch, stone slamming down, sealing the chamber from the outside. Dust billowed. Men screamed and fell back. The night went quiet except for coughing, the distant crackle of fire, and a far-off scream from town that didn't sound like any man giving orders. Cade stood in the sage with Ma Hart at his feet and the ledger in his hand, staring at the sealed crack like it had swallowed the last person who ever mattered to him. Then someone grabbed Cade from behind. Hard. An arm locked around his throat, yanking him back. Cade's elbow slammed into ribs, but the grip held. The ledger slipped from his hand and hit the dirt. A voice hissed in his ear, shaking. "You don't know what you've done." Crane, close, alive, reeking of smoke and panic. He dragged Cade backward toward the dark line of cottonwoods, away from the torches, away from the men who were finally starting to understand the ledger wasn't just paper. Crane's voice trembled with fury and fear. "Judge ain't the worst thing in this town, Mercer. He was the only thing keeping it fed." Cade twisted, trying to breathe. "Where are the kids?" Crane's grip tightened until Cade's vision sparked. "You'll see," Crane whispered. "You'll see when they open the other door." And as Crane hauled him into the darkness, the sealed stone behind them thudded once from the inside, slow, deliberate, like something testing the barrier, learning the shape of the night. Crane dragged Cade through sage and hardpan, keeping low as torchlight jittered behind them. Cade's boots skidded on loose stones. The man's forearm crushed his throat, cutting off air in short, angry bursts. Cade drove his elbow back again. This time, it landed clean. Crane grunted, but the grip didn't loosen. He was running on pure fear now, and fear made men strong. "You don't get to drag me anywhere," Cade rasped. Crane's mouth was right by Cade's ear, breath hot and shaking. "I get to keep you alive long enough to fix what you broke." Cade's hand clawed at Crane's arm, searching for leverage, searching for a seam. His fingers found a scar ridge near Crane's wrist, thick, ropey skin. Old burn. Cade dug his nails into it. Crane jolted, hissed in pain, and for a half second, the grip slackened. Cade sucked in a ragged breath and twisted hard, trying to break the hold. Crane slammed him forward into the trunk of a cottonwood. Bark tore Cade's cheek. Stars burst behind his eyes. Crane pressed his weight in, pinning Cade's chest to the tree. "Don't," Crane growled. "Not now." Behind them, the torchlit commotion in the sage had shifted. Men were shouting, but the tone had changed. Less command, more panic. Someone screamed the judge's name again and again. Another voice yelled about the book, as if the ledger was a snake loose in grass. Cade strained his neck, trying to look back. "You left it," he wheezed. "The ledger." Crane's breath hitched. "Let them scramble for paper," he said. "Paper don't bite." Cade spat blood. "Kids do. Where are they?" Crane's jaw worked. In the dim light under the cottonwoods, his pale eyes looked almost watery, but his smile was wrong. Tight, desperate. You want to know? Fine. I'll show you the difference between a town with rules and a town with hunger. He dragged Cade off the tree and hauled him deeper into the cottonwoods, toward the creek. The ground dipped and softened. The air smelled of wet roots and cold mud. The moon was thin, and the trees swallowed it. Cade's boots splashed through shallow water. The creek ran low, but it ran fast, whispering over stones like it was trying to hide its own sound. Crane shoved Cade down behind a fallen log and crouched, keeping his head low. He finally loosened his arm just enough that Cade could breathe, but not enough to get free. "Listen," Crane said. At first, Cade heard nothing but water and distant shouting. Then he heard a second rhythm layered under it, soft, quick footfalls on leaf litter. Children's steps. Cade's head snapped up. Across the creek between two cottonwoods, a small figure moved. Then another, a third, 4 shadows. They didn't run like kids playing. They moved like they'd learned to stay alive, low, fast, silent, stopping every few steps to look back. Lila. Even in the dark, Cade recognized her by the way she held her shoulders, forced stiff, like she'd decided pain would not be allowed to bend her. One arm was clamped around May, the little girl's head tucked into Lila's side. Silas stumbled after them, clutching his ribs like he'd been hit. Toby limped, one leg dragging slightly. 4. Cade's chest tightened so hard it hurt. "Jonah," he whispered. Crane's hand clamped over Cade's mouth. "Not yet," he hissed. The children reached the far bank and huddled in the roots. Lila looked back toward the town lights, eyes wide, face streaked with dirt. She spoke to the others, but Cade couldn't hear the words over the creek. Then a lantern glow appeared behind them. A man stepped into view on the far side, holding a lamp low. Not Rusk, not Crane. Someone else. He wore a hat and a coat that looked too clean for this hour. He moved with careful confidence, like he knew exactly where the children would end up. Lila snapped upright, pulling May behind her. Silas and Toby recoiled into the roots. The man lifted his free hand in a gesture that would have looked gentle if it weren't so practiced. He said something, soft, coaxing. Lila shook her head violently. Even from here, Cade could see her mouth forming one word over and over. "No." The man didn't rush. He stepped closer, slow, as if he had all night. The lantern light painted his face, a thin face, neat mustache, pale eyes. Cade's stomach dropped. Crane whispered in Cade's ear, almost reverent. "Sheriff Danner." Cade's mind flashed back to the corridor, the names scratched into wood, the idea of badges moving from hand to hand. "Sheriff," Cade breathed, voice muffled under Crane's palm. Crane's eyes stayed fixed on the scene across the creek. "He's the one who carried the collar key before Rusk. He's the one who taught me what order costs." Danner stopped a few paces from the children. He lowered his lantern and spoke again, calm, patient. Lila's posture faltered. She looked down at May. May was shaking so hard, her teeth must have been rattling. Silas wiped his face with a dirty sleeve. Toby's swollen eye glinted in the light. Then, to Cade's horror, Lila took a step forward. Cade surged, trying to rise. Crane yanked him back, crushing his jaw. "You go out there, they die," Crane hissed. "You understand? Danner don't bargain like the judge. He just takes." Lila stepped closer to Danner, hands raised slightly, palms out. Cade couldn't hear her words, but he saw the pleading in her mouth, the way her chin trembled despite her trying to keep it hard. Danner listened for a moment, then shook his head once. He reached into his coat. Lila flinched back. Danner pulled out something small and dark and held it up in the lantern light. A child's boot, little, scuffed, torn lace. May made a thin keening sound. Silas's knees buckled. Toby covered his mouth with both hands. Lila froze. Cade's heartbeat slammed in his ears. He knew before anyone said it. He knew the way men knew storms by the taste of air. Crane's voice was a whisper of poison. "That's Jonah's." Lila's face crumpled for half a second, grief breaking through the hardness like a crack in ice. Then she straightened again, jaw clenched so tight it looked like it could shatter. She stepped forward, closer to Danner, and held out her hands like she was offering herself. Danner's lantern swung slightly. He leaned in, said something that made Lila's eyes widen. Then he pointed, past the creek, toward town. Toward Dry Creek. He wanted her to walk back, not alone, with him. Lila looked over her shoulder at the 3 children in the roots. May clung to the tree like she might fall through the earth. Silas's lips moved in a silent prayer. Toby stared at the boot like it was the only thing left in the world. Lila swallowed, then nodded once. She turned and made a sharp motion with her hand, an order. May resisted at first, then stumbled forward. Silas followed. Toby limped after them, eyes empty. Danner began to lead them along the bank toward town. Cade's whole body went hot. He fought Crane's grip, twisting, teeth bared. "We can take him," Cade snarled. Crane's voice shook. "You don't understand," he said, and for the first time it sounded less like threat and more like confession. "He ain't bringing them to jail. He's bringing them to the other door." Cade went still at the words. "The other door," he breathed. Crane swallowed. His eyes were fixed on the lantern glow moving away with the children. "There's more than one way into the ground. Rusk had the mine. Danner has the cellar." Cade turned his head, straining to see more than shadows. "Where?" Crane's mouth tightened. "Old church, back of town. The one with no cross. Folks think it's storage. Folks don't ask why it's locked from the outside." Cade's mind snapped a plan into place, sharp and desperate. "Then we go now." Crane gave a short, bitter laugh. "You think I'm helping you? I'm showing you so you'll understand what you did when you threw that key. The collar was the only thing that kept it fed on our terms." Cade's eyes narrowed. "Our?" Crane flinched at his own word and recovered with anger. "Yeah, our. Because you're in it now. You got the ledger and you got the town's throat in your hand. You think that makes you powerful? It makes you the next meal." Across the creek, Danner and the 4 children disappeared into the darker line where the cottonwoods gave way to open street. Only the lantern glow remained for a moment, bobbing toward Dry Creek Center like a will-o'-the-wisp, leading them to something worse. Ma Hart's scream still rang in Cade's memory from the sage. Cade pictured her on her knees, reaching at empty air, not knowing her children were being marched back into town by a sheriff with a dead boy's boot in his hand. Cade felt something settle in him, heavy and cold. He looked at Crane. "Let me go." Crane's grip tightened again, but not as hard as before. His voice dropped, raw. "If I let you go, you'll either die or you'll open it." Cade's eyes stayed locked on the path the lantern had taken. "Then die," Cade said, "or open it, but I'm not staying here." Crane's breath hitched. He stared at Cade's face, searching for bluff, finding none. For a long second, the only sound was the creak. Then Crane released him. Cade rose slowly, muscles coiled, ready for a knife in his back. It didn't come. Crane stood too, wiping sweat from his mouth with the back of his hand, eyes haunted. "You got one chance," he said. "One, because once you step near that church, it'll smell you." Cade's voice was flat. "It already knows me." Crane nodded, almost reluctantly. "Yeah," he whispered. "That's the problem." They moved along the creek line, keeping low, the cottonwoods hiding them from the town's lanterns. Dry Creek lay ahead, warm lights in dark corners, and somewhere inside it, a door that didn't belong in any church. As they neared the outskirts, the wind shifted. Cade caught a faint scent under smoke and sage, cold iron, and something else, like damp wood and old breath. Crane stopped dead, his head tilted, listening. Cade followed his gaze. On the horizon behind the town, where the sealed ground should have been still, a low, pale mist was rising, too steady, too purposeful, like something exhaling through cracks no one could see. Crane's voice came out barely audible. It found another vent. And from somewhere deep beneath Dry Creek, faint enough to almost be imagined, came a slow, deliberate knock. They reached the back edge of Dry Creek where the street lamps thinned and the buildings leaned into darkness. The town looked almost peaceful from here. Warm windows, quiet porches, a dog barking somewhere distant. Cade knew better now. Peace was just the mask this place wore so decent men could sleep. Crane kept to the shadows like he'd been born in them. He moved fast, but every few steps he paused, listening, head tilted like a coyote. Cade followed, eyes scanning for movement behind curtains, for silhouettes on rooftops. "You said the church," Cade whispered. Crane pointed with 2 fingers. "There." At the far end of a narrow lane, half swallowed by mesquite and dust, stood a squat building that looked like a church only if you squinted. No steeple, no cross, just rough timber walls and a sagging roofline. The door faced the street, but the windows were boarded from the inside. Whoever built it hadn't wanted light going in or coming out. Cade's stomach tightened. "That's not a church." Crane's mouth twitched. "It's what folks call it because it's easier than saying the place we don't talk about." They slipped behind a line of stacked firewood and watched. A lantern glow bobbed into view from the left, Sheriff Danner leading the 4 children along the lane. The boot was gone now, tucked away. Danner's posture remained unhurried, almost gentle, like he was escorting them home. Lila walked at the front. Her shoulders were square, but her hands shook. May stumbled beside her, face pale in lantern light. Silas kept wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, leaving dirty streaks across his cheeks. Toby limped, jaw clenched, trying not to cry. Danner stopped at the church door and produced a key. He didn't look at the children when he unlocked it. He looked at the lock like it was the only honest thing in town. The door opened inward. Cold air poured out, visible in the lantern flame as it bent toward the darkness inside. May flinched, grabbing Lila's sleeve. Lila turned just enough to murmur something to her, one last promise Cade couldn't hear. Then, Lila stepped forward and guided May over the threshold. Silas followed. Toby hesitated, staring at the dark with his one good eye. Danner said something soft. Toby swallowed hard and went in. Danner closed the door behind them. The lock clicked. Cade's nails dug into his palms. "We go now." Crane grabbed Cade's sleeve. "Not through the front." Cade jerked free. "Then where?" Crane nodded toward the rear of the building. "There's a hatch under the back step. It's how they move things without being seen." Cade's eyes narrowed. "You've been there." Crane's face went hard. "Once, that was enough." They moved along the building's side, keeping to the shadow where the wall blocked the streetlight. The wood smelled old, damp, and treated with something bitter. Cade passed a boarded window and felt rather than heard a faint vibration in the timber, as if something inside the building was humming quietly. Crane stopped at the back corner and crouched. There was a short set of steps leading to a rear door that looked sealed shut by a crossbar on the inside. Beneath the lowest step, half hidden by weeds, sat a square of boards with a rusted iron ring. Crane hooked 2 fingers under the ring. His hand trembled. "This is it." Cade knelt beside him. "Open it." Crane stared at him, eyes wide in the dark. "If we open this, it knows we're close." Cade didn't blink. "It already knows my name." Crane swallowed, then lifted. The boards rose an inch, then 2. A breath of air slid out, cold, sour, carrying the same metallic tang Cade had smelled in the first tunnel, but cleaner, sharper, like iron left in rain. From below came a sound, not footsteps, not chains, something like slow scratching, as if nails were testing wood from the other side. Crane froze, knuckles white. Cade lifted his hand and eased the hatch higher. A ladder descended into darkness. The space below wasn't timber-lined like the mine tunnel. This smelled like stone and wet earth and something older. Cade raised his head slightly, listening. From somewhere inside the building, through the wood and gaps, came a muffled whimper. "May." Cade's jaw tightened. He started down the ladder. Crane caught his boot. "Wait." Cade looked back. "What?" Crane's voice was thin. "If Danner catches us down there, he won't talk. He'll just lock it and walk away." Cade stared at him. "Then you come with me." Crane's eyes flicked toward the street, toward the town's lights, like he wanted to run. Then he looked back into the hatch, and whatever he saw in his own mind made him nod once. They descended. The ladder ended on a stone floor, slick with moisture. Cade set his boots carefully, lanternless now. The only light was a faint glow seeping through cracks in the ceiling boards above, and the dim shimmer of something reflective on the walls, thin streaks of mineral like frozen tears. The passage ahead was low and narrow. Someone had dug it by hand, leaving tool marks in the stone. It sloped downward under the building, deeper than a cellar should go. Crane whispered, "No one hears down here." Cade moved forward, shoulders brushing rock. The air grew colder with each step, and that iron smell sharpened until it tasted like a penny on the tongue. Then Cade saw it. A second door. Not iron-banded, not a trapdoor. This one was stone set into stone, a slab fitted into the passage with a seam so tight it looked like the rock had healed around it. In the center was a metal plate with a keyhole that had been polished by use, a collar lock. Cade's stomach turned. "Same kind of key," Crane's voice shook. "That's why the judge had it. That's why you shouldn't have thrown it." Cade's eyes narrowed. "Then how does Danner open it?" Crane pointed to the wall. A small recess held an oil lamp already lit, its flame steady and unnatural down here. Beside it sat a shallow bowl filled with something dark and thick. Cade leaned closer and smelled it. Blood. Fresh. Crane's face was pale. "That's how." Cade's pulse hammered. "He feeds it." From behind the stone door came a faint sound, soft crying, multiple voices overlapping in fear. May, Silas, Toby, and Lila's voice, low and urgent, trying to steady them, trying to keep them quiet. Cade moved toward the bowl, fighting nausea. Crane grabbed his wrist. "Don't touch it." Cade yanked free. "We don't have time." Crane's voice cracked. "You touch that, you're offering yourself." Cade stared at the door seam. The crying behind it rose and fell, and Lila's voice pressed through in fragments, words not meant for Cade but meant for survival. Then, from the other side of the stone, a calm voice spoke, close and clear. "Not Rusk. Danner." "You can come out, Mercer," he said softly. "I heard you the moment you opened the hatch." Cade went still. Crane's breath hitched. "No," Danner continued, conversational, as if they were neighbors discussing weather. "You didn't think I'd leave the backstep unguarded. You didn't think I'd hear the boards complain. You're not from here." Cade turned slowly. The passage behind them was empty, but the voice was closer than it should be, as if Danner were standing right behind Cade's ear. Then a lantern glow appeared at the top of the ladder shaft, spilling down like liquid light. Danner's silhouette filled the opening. He climbed down without hurry, boots finding rungs in the dark like he'd done it 1,000 times. His lantern hung from one hand. In the other, he held something that made Cade's stomach drop. A small cloth bundle. Danner stopped on the last rung and stepped onto the stone, lantern light revealing his face. Calm, neat, pale-eyed. His gaze went first to Cade, then to Crane. "Well," Danner said, "Hollis. Didn't expect you to come back down here." Crane's jaw trembled. "Sheriff." Danner's lips curved slightly. "That's right. Sheriff." Cade's eyes stayed on the bundle in Danner's hand. "What is that?" Danner looked down at it as if remembering he had it. "This?" He loosened the cloth slowly, deliberately. Inside was a lock of hair, dark and dusty, tied with a string. Jonah's. Ma Hart's voice rose in Cade's memory like a knife. Danner lifted his eyes back to Cade. "You want to know where the fifth went," he said softly. "He went where all debts go when they come due." Cade's hands clenched. "Open the door." Danner smiled, patient. "I will." He nodded toward the bowl. "But you'll do the honoring. You'll feed it. Because you threw away the key and now you have to pay in a different currency." Crane shook his head violently. "Don't make him." Danner's gaze flicked to Crane, and Crane went silent like a dog that had been kicked too many times. "This doesn't concern you." The stone door behind Cade made a faint sound, like a slow inhale through a crack. The oil lamp flame beside it bent toward the seam. Danner stepped closer, lantern raising, and spoke toward the stone as if addressing someone on the other side. "Someone came to take what isn't his," Danner said, voice gentle. "Someone brought the book." The crying behind the door spiked, panicked. Lila's voice rose, fierce, cracking. "Don't!" Cade's blood turned to ice. The door didn't move, but the seam darkened, as if something pressed against it from within. Danner looked at Cade, eyes steady. "You have two choices, Mercer. Feed it and take your 4, or refuse and listen to them disappear one by one." Cade's jaw clenched until it hurt. Crane whispered, almost inaudible, "He'll keep you here forever." Cade stared at the bowl. Then he looked at Danner. Then at the stone door behind which 4 children were crying. He stepped toward the bowl. Danner's smile widened slightly, satisfied. Cade dipped 2 fingers into the dark liquid, and the flame in the oil lamp snapped tall, as if it had been waiting for that touch. From the stone door came a soft, pleased sound, a whisper that wasn't Lila's, wasn't May's, wasn't any child's at all. "Welcome," it breathed, and the keyhole plate in the center of the stone door began to turn on its own. Cade's fingers came away slick and dark. The blood was warmer than the air down here, and the moment it touched his skin, the lamp flame beside the door snapped higher, brightening without any draft to feed it. The metal plate in the stone door began to rotate on its own. Not fast, not like a lock being picked, like a deliberate hand on the other side, turning it at exactly the speed it wanted. Crane took a step back, bumping the rough wall, eyes wide. "No," he whispered. "No, no." Danner watched the keyhole plate turning with a calm satisfaction that made Cade want to break his face. "See," Danner said softly, "it understands manners." From behind the stone, the crying shifted. May's whimpers went quiet, replaced by one thin, frightened breath. Silas made a muffled sound, like he was trying not to sob out loud. Toby's breathing came in fast, shallow pulls. Lila's voice pressed through the seam, low and steady, fighting to stay in control. "Don't move," she told them. "Don't make it notice you." The plate finished its turn. A soft click sounded inside the stone, and the door seam widened by a hair. Cold air spilled out, colder than the tunnels, carrying that same damp wood breath but sharper, like metal left too long in the rain. Danner raised his lantern, leaning toward the seam like a man peering into a cradle. "Open," he murmured. The stone door moved. It didn't swing like a normal door. It slid, grinding against rock, a heavy slab shifting sideways into a recess with a sound that vibrated through Cade's teeth. Beyond it was a chamber cut clean and round, the walls smooth as if polished by years of hands. A ring of iron bolts studded the stone in a perfect circle, and between the bolts ran chains, dozens of them, linked into a web that hung in the air like a trap. The children were inside, huddled on the floor. May was pressed into Lila's side, face streaked with tears. Silas sat with his knees drawn up, shaking. Toby's hands were clamped over his ears, eyes squeezed shut. Lila stood, though her legs trembled. She put herself between the others in the doorway, chin lifted, eyes burning with hatred and fear. Cade's chest clenched so hard it felt like the air had turned solid. "Lila!" Her eyes snapped to him, and for a fraction of a second the hardness cracked, relief, then terror. "Don't come in," she hissed. "Don't—" A chain in the ceiling twitched, not from the door moving, not from any breeze. It twitched the way a muscle twitches under skin. The children all froze at once, like they'd been trained by pain. Cade's body went cold. He kept his feet planted at the threshold. Danner stepped forward without hesitation and crossed the seam into the chamber. Lila flinched back, pulling May with her. "Stay away!" Danner didn't look at her. He looked up at the chain web, eyes calm, and spoke as if addressing a quiet animal. "Easy," he said. "Easy. We've been fed." A low sound answered from somewhere in the rock. Not a voice, a satisfied vibration, like a purr traveling through stone. Crane made a strangled noise behind Cade. "Sheriff? Don't—" Danner turned his head slightly, annoyed. "Hollis, you're making noise." Crane fell silent again, throat working. Danner looked back at Cade. "4," he said, as if reciting inventory. "You got what you came for." Cade's eyes stayed on the kids. "Bring them out." Danner smiled faintly. "They can walk." Lila shook her head fiercely. "We can't. It—" She swallowed hard, voice cracking. "It knows our steps." Another chain twitched, then settled. Cade's stomach tightened. He looked around the chamber, spotting it now. Shallow grooves etched into the stone floor in a perfect circle, like something had been dragged around and around, carving a path. The chains weren't just restraints. They were a boundary. Danner stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "Go on, then. Walk 'em out. But don't touch the chains." Cade didn't move. "Why are you doing this, Danner?" Danner's expression remained polite. "Because a town needs a place to put what it can't explain." Cade's jaw clenched. "You mean the bodies?" Danner's eyes didn't flicker. "Bodies are easy. It's the stories that rot." Cade felt the ledger under his arm like a live coal. "This book ends you." Danner's gaze shifted to the ledger for the first time, and something like genuine interest flickered. "That book ends a lot of people," he corrected. "Not just me." Lila's eyes locked on the ledger. "What is that?" Cade's voice was low. "Proof," May whispered. "Will it bring Jonah back?" The question landed like a bullet. Cade's throat tightened. He forced himself to look at her small face swollen with grief and dirt. "No," Cade said quietly, "but it'll make sure nobody takes another Jonah." Danner chuckled softly. "Listen to him. He thinks daylight fixes underground." Cade's patience snapped. "Move away from them." Danner's smile thinned. "Or?" Cade stepped forward one pace, stopping at the seam. "Or I drag you out by your throat?" Danner studied Cade's face for a long second, as if measuring whether he meant it. Then he nodded once, almost approving. "All right," he said. "Let's see what kind of man you are." He reached up and touched one chain with 2 fingers. The chain trembled. Every bolt in the wall answered with a faint metallic tick, like 100 tiny teeth clicking together. The lamp flame outside the door bent hard toward the chamber and flared. The air turned colder still. The children made small sounds, May's stifled sob, Silas's whimper, Toby's broken breath, like they recognized the beginning of something. Lila's eyes went wide. "No," she whispered. "Don't." Danner's hand stayed on the chain. He looked at Cade, calm as ever. "You want them out? You come in and take them. But understand this, once you step inside, it knows you as family." Cade felt his pulse in his fingertips. He looked at the kids, 4 living, shaking reasons to do something stupid. He looked at Crane behind him, pale and sweating, eyes darting like a trapped animal. He looked at Danner, fingers still on the chain, the polite face of a man who had fed a monster for so long he thought he owned it. Then Cade stepped into the chamber. The moment his boot crossed the seam, the chain web above him tightened with a soft, unified sound, like a net being drawn. And from the stone, from the bolts, from the damp air itself, a voice spoke, not loud, not angry, just close enough to be inside Cade's skull. "Cade Mercer," it said, "dead acknowledged." The stone door behind him slid an inch on its own. The stone door slid another inch behind Cade, grinding softly as if the chamber had decided it preferred fewer exits. Lila's eyes snapped to the moving slab. "Don't let it close," she whispered, voice tight. Cade didn't turn. If he turned his head, the thing in the stone would learn the shape of his fear. He kept his gaze forward and low, eyes on the floor grooves, the circle boundary, the chains above that had tightened in unison. "Kids," he said, voice calm by force, "one step at a time. Follow my feet. Don't touch anything." May clung to Lila's sleeve, shaking. Silas's lips moved without sound. Toby's breath came in quick, shallow bursts through his nose. Danner stood just inside the doorway, lantern in hand, his fingers still resting on the chain as if he were stroking a cat. His face showed nothing but patient interest. Crane hovered outside the seam, pale and sweating, shoulders hunched as if he expected the ceiling to drop on him. He couldn't make himself step in. Cade shifted his weight carefully, testing the floor. The stone under his boot felt faintly warm, not from fire but from something deeper, like the place held its own temperature. "Dead acknowledged," the voice repeated inside his skull, softer now, almost pleased. Cade swallowed and spoke to Danner without raising his voice. "Open the door, all the way." Danner smiled faintly. "It's opening itself." As if to prove it, the slab slid another inch, then stopped, like it was listening. Cade's eyes narrowed. "It's waiting for something." Danner's gaze flicked to Cade's hand, to the dark smear still drying on his fingers. "It likes an offering." Cade clenched his bloody fingers into a fist, then forced them open again. "You already got your offering." Danner's smile didn't move. "You think that bowl was for the lock? That bowl is for you." Lila's voice cut in, shaking with fury. "Stop talking to him." The chain web above them gave a tiny tremor, like it approved of Lila's instinct. Cade nodded once. "All right, we're leaving." He turned slightly and extended his left hand toward Lila without stepping closer. "Lila, you go first. Take May. Put your feet exactly where mine were." Lila stared at him, then at the floor, then up at the chains. Her throat bobbed. "Lila," Cade said again, steady. "Look at me." She did. Cade kept his voice low and simple. "You're the strongest one here. You get them out." Lila's jaw clenched. She nodded once and guided May forward. They moved one step. Nothing happened. They moved a second step, placing feet carefully into the faint depressions Cade had made. A chain above them twitched. May whimpered, but Lila didn't stop. Cade held his breathing shallow, careful, like the air itself could be counted against them. Silas followed, trembling so hard Cade expected him to fall. Cade shifted one boot half an inch to make a wider path, then froze again, letting the boy match it. Toby limped forward last. His bad leg caught, and for a terrible heartbeat his foot slid outside Cade's track. A bolt in the wall ticked, sharp, immediate. The chain web tightened with a sound like a net pulled through water. Toby froze, eyes huge. Cade's voice came out like gravel. "Don't move." Toby held still, tears sliding down his cheek. Cade inched his boot back slowly, placing it beside Toby's foot, close enough that Toby could realign without shifting his weight far. Cade nodded once. Toby dragged his foot back into the track, millimeter by millimeter. The chain web loosened a fraction, as if satisfied. Cade exhaled once, quietly. Danner chuckled. "Clever." Cade didn't look at him. "Shut up." Danner's eyes glittered. "You're speaking to your creditor." Cade's stomach tightened at the word. They reached the seam. Lila stepped over it first with May. Silas followed. Toby hesitated, eyes flicking up at the chains one last time, then crossed. 3 out, 4 out. Cade's chest loosened for the first time in minutes. Then the stone door moved again, sliding fast now, not an inch at a time, closing. Cade lunged for the seam, instinctively reaching for the slab. Lila screamed, "No, don't touch it!" Cade stopped short, hands hovering in the air. The slab continued to slide. Danner's calm finally cracked into irritation. He lifted his lantern and stepped toward the seam as if to block Cade's escape. "Not yet, Mercer." Cade snapped his eyes up to Danner's face for the first time since stepping in. The voice in the stone breathed, pleased. "Seen." Cade felt it, something like a hook behind his ribs tugging. Danner lifted his free hand toward Cade, palm open. "Give me the ledger." Cade's jaw clenched. "It's not here." Danner's eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me." Cade's mind flashed. He'd carried it under his arm out in the sage. Then Crane grabbed him. Then the ledger fell. Then he was dragged into Cottonwoods. He'd never picked it back up. He didn't have it. That realization hit like a punch. Rusk's men had it, or it was in the dirt, or it was already back in the wrong hands. Cade said, cold and flat, "You don't need the ledger. You already have a town full of cowards." Danner's face tightened. "Then you're useless." He reached again toward the chain with 2 fingers. Cade moved first. He drove his shoulder into Danner's chest, slamming him backward into the chamber wall before those fingers could settle on iron. Danner grunted, lantern swinging wild. Oil sloshed inside the glass. Crane shouted from outside, "Mercer!" Cade didn't answer. He grabbed Danner by the vest and shoved him toward the seam. Danner recovered fast, hooking his leg and sweeping Cade's foot. Cade stumbled, caught himself, and kept driving forward, brute force now. He was done negotiating. The stone voice pulsed in his skull. Debt, debt, debt. It wanted him inside, wanted him to stay. Cade snarled, pushing harder. Danner's hand shot out and grabbed the chain after all. The chamber answered instantly. Every bolt ticked at once, a chorus of metal teeth. The chain web snapped taut overhead, dropping a few inches like a net falling. Cade threw himself forward, dragging Danner with him, and crossed the seam in the same motion. The net slammed down behind Cade's shoulders, missing him by inches, chains clattering where his head had been. Danner's eyes widened, a rare flash of surprise. Cade used it. He shoved Danner out into the passage and staggered backward, keeping his feet under him as the stone door began to slide shut again, faster now, angry. Lila grabbed Cade's arm with both hands and yanked. "Go!" Cade stumbled into the passage fully. Crane darted forward, finally brave enough now that he was outside the chamber, and slammed his shoulder into the sliding stone slab. It slowed, grinding, but didn't stop. Crane screamed through clenched teeth, "Help!" Cade stepped in beside him and drove his shoulder into the stone too. The slab fought them like it was alive. "Don't," the voice in the stone whispered, no longer pleased. "Stay." Cade's vision blurred with effort. He shoved again, muscles screaming. Crane spat blood and shoved harder. The slab stopped for half a heartbeat, just enough. Lila jammed her fingers into the seam and shoved a loose iron spike, something used to hold the hatch, into the gap. Metal shrieked as stone tried to slide over it. The slab halted, jammed. The chamber behind it thudded once, hard like something had rammed the inside. May screamed and hid her face in Lila's skirt. Silas backed away, shaking. Toby covered his ears again. Crane stumbled back from the slab, panting. His eyes were wild. "We need to go, now, before it finds another way." Cade's head rang with the voice's whisper fading, like it was retreating but memorizing. "Debt," it murmured, distant now. "Owed." Cade looked at the 4 children, alive and trembling. "Where's your mother?" Lila's face crumpled. Back at the sage, with the men. Cade's stomach turned. He could see her in his mind, alone, not knowing Jonah was gone, not knowing her children had been marched under a false church. Crane grabbed Cade's sleeve, pulling. "You go back out there. You're dead." Cade yanked free. "Then you run." Crane stared at him. "What?" Cade's voice was flat. "Take them to the line shack by the creek, 2 miles past the cottonwoods. Same place I told Lila earlier. Stay off the road. If anyone stops you, you don't answer. You keep moving." Lila's eyes widened. "You're not coming?" Cade swallowed hard. "I'm getting your ma." Crane's face twisted. "You're gonna walk back into Torchlight without the ledger, without a rifle, with every man in town wanting your neck." Cade's jaw clenched. "Then I'll borrow someone else's." He turned, already moving up the ladder toward the hatch under the back step. Crane called after him, voice cracking. "Mercer, if Rusk's alive, he'll be at the square. If he's dead—" Cade didn't stop. "Then Danner's running the town." He climbed fast, shoved the hatch open, and emerged into the cold night. Dry Creek's lanterns were brighter now. Men ran in knots, shouting, carrying buckets and torches. Smoke still drifted low over the sage flats where the first tunnels had burned. And above it all, cutting through the noise, Cade heard a bell ringing from the center of town. Slow, deliberate, not a warning bell, a gathering bell. Cade turned toward it, heart sinking. They were calling everyone to the square. And if they were calling the square, it meant Judge Rusk, or someone wearing his authority, was about to make a public ending out of tonight. The bell kept ringing, slow, steady, not panicked. A call to witness. Cade moved along the dark edge of the lane, keeping buildings between himself and the street. He could see men converging toward the square with lanterns and rifles, their shadows stretched long on the packed dirt. Some were shouting questions, others were quiet, moving with the kind of purpose you only saw when a town had decided something together. He tasted copper when he swallowed. His head still ached where Crane had slammed him into the cottonwood, but the ache kept him sharp. At the corner of a livery, Cade paused and peered around. The square was lit up like a stage, torches mounted on posts, 2 lanterns hanging from the gallows beam. The noose already swung there, slow in the night breeze, as if someone had set it up early and left it to wait. And at the center, on a raised platform, stood Judge Rusk. Alive. Clean now, no ink, no dust, no sign he'd been in the earth at all. His vest lay smooth, his hair combed. Only his eyes looked colder than before. Beside him stood Sheriff Danner, lantern in one hand, the other resting lightly on the rail as if he were merely attending a sermon. At the foot of the platform was Deputy Crane, shaking with rage and soot, pressing his jaw as if it hurt to breathe. A line of men flanked them, Rusk's men, Danner's men, or just men who didn't know the difference anymore. Cade's stomach tightened. If Rusk looked this put together, it meant he'd surfaced fast and controlled the story faster. Rusk raised a hand, and the bell stopped. Silence spread through the crowd, thick as smoke. "My friends," Rusk said, voice carrying easily, "tonight we were attacked." Murmurs rose, then settled. "A stranger rode in," Rusk continued, "and set fire to our tunnels. He attempted to steal private records. He threatened our peace, and in his desperation, he murdered a child." A low wave of anger ran through the crowd like wind through wheat. Cade felt his vision narrow. He didn't have the ledger. He didn't have a rifle. He had only his hands and the truth, and truth didn't stop a rope once it was chosen. Rusk lifted a cloth bundle from the table beside him and opened it for the crowd to see. A small boot. Jonah's. Ma Hart's name ripped itself out of someone's throat from the edge of the square. Raw animal. "No!" The crowd parted slightly as she fought forward, hair wild, face streaked with dust and tears, arms flailing as if she could physically tear the air open and pull Jonah back through it. 2 men caught her, holding her by the shoulders. She kicked and screamed, her voice cracking. Where are my babies? Where are—" Danner leaned close to her, said something too soft for Cade to hear. Ma's heart froze for half a heartbeat, her face collapsing as if she'd been hit in the chest. Then she began to sob, the sound so broken it made men look away. Rusk's voice stayed steady. "We will not be a town that lets violence go unanswered. Dry Creek will remain civilized." He nodded toward the gallows. The noose swung once, lazy, patient. Cade's pulse hammered. He scanned the crowd for any opening, any weapon, any chance to get to Ma's heart before Danner took her somewhere quiet. His gaze caught movement at the edge of the square, two small shapes slipping between barrels, hugging shadows. Lila. And behind her, Silas. They should have been running to the line shack. They should have been gone. Lila's face was tight with stubborn fury, eyes fixed on her mother. Silas trembled beside her, hands clenched, trying not to cry. Cade's chest tightened. They'd come back. Because kids always came back for their own, no matter what it cost. Cade slipped along the back of the crowd, moving toward them. A hand clamped on his shoulder. Cade spun, ready to strike. It was an old man with a barber's apron still on, face pale, eyes darting. He hissed, "You're him." Cade didn't answer. The old man's gaze flicked toward the platform. "They'll hang you, or they'll hang someone else and call it you." Cade's voice was low. "Where's my rifle?" The old man swallowed. "Livery, behind the stalls. Crane took it, then tossed it when he ran. I saw it." Cade's jaw tightened. "Why tell me?" The old man's eyes were wet. "Because my boy went missing 2 winters back, and the judge told me to stop asking." He swallowed hard. "If you're going to burn this place, do it proper." Cade nodded once and moved on. He reached Lila and Silas in the shadows behind a stack of crates. Lila's eyes snapped to him, fierce. "Where's May and Toby?" "Crane took them," Cade whispered, "to the creek shack. They're alive." Lila's breath hitched, relief and terror mixing. "Ma, I know," Cade said. "We get her out." Silas's voice shook. "They said he killed Jonah." Cade stared at the boot on the platform. His throat tightened. "Jonah's gone," he said quietly. "But he didn't die for their lie." Lila's eyes glistened, but her jaw stayed set. "How do we stop this?" Cade looked at the gallows, the crowd, the men with rifles. "We don't convince them," he said. "We make them see." He scanned the square again. Then he saw it. What Rusk expected to happen. A wagon sat near the platform with a covered crate on it, canvas pulled tight. 2 men stood beside it with shotguns, guarding it like it was worth more than gold. The canvas shifted, subtle. A faint clink of chain. The collar box. Rusk wasn't just telling a story, he was bringing the story's teeth into the open, ready to use it on a crowd if the crowd ever wavered. Cade's stomach turned cold. If Rusk opened it in the square, it wouldn't matter what Cade did. The whole town would kneel. Cade leaned to Lila. "When I move, you get your ma. You grab her and run. Don't stop." Lila's eyes widened. "What are you going to do?" Cade's voice stayed flat. "End the collar." Silas stared, shaking. "How?" Cade looked past them, toward the livery line. "With fire," he said, "and with the only thing Rusk doesn't know how to handle." Lila swallowed. "What's that?" Cade met her eyes. "A crowd that realizes it's been paying for its own chain." He slid back into the darkness and headed for the livery. Behind the stalls, the air stank of hay and manure and fear sweat from horses sensing the town's mood. Cade found his rifle where the old man said, half hidden under a trough dusted with straw. He checked it by touch, 2 rounds left in the tube, 1 in the chamber, enough for a decision. He slipped out the back and circled toward the square again, keeping low. Rusk was still speaking, voice smooth. "We will make an example tonight." Danner stood beside Ma Hart now, one hand on her shoulder, holding her in place with the casual ownership of a man who'd held too many grieving mothers too close. Cade's vision narrowed. He breathed once, deep, steady. He stepped onto the edge of the square where torchlight hit him. A dozen heads turned. A shout went up. "There!" Rifles lifted. Cade didn't run. He raised his voice loud enough to cut through the square. "Dry Creek!" he shouted. "You want a murderer? Look at your judge!" The crowd roared, anger spiking. Rusk's expression didn't change. He lifted one hand slightly, calming them like trained animals. "Mr. Mercer," he said, almost kindly, "you're making this harder." Cade kept walking forward, rifle held low, not aimed yet. "You don't even know where your ledger is," he called. "You don't even need it. You've had this town feeding your tunnels for years." Rusk's eyes sharpened. "Shoot him," he said, quiet. A rifle cracked. The shot hit dirt near Cade's foot, too close. Cade didn't flinch. He kept walking. The crowd hesitated. Men didn't like shooting a man who didn't run. It made them feel like the villain in their own story. Cade pointed toward the guarded wagon. "Ask him what's in that crate," he shouted. "Ask him why it clinks like chains. Ask him why he keeps a church with no cross locked from the outside." Murmurs rose, uncertain, nervous. Rusk's voice hardened. "Enough." He nodded once toward the wagon. One guard reached for the canvas. Cade's pulse slammed. This was it. He raised his rifle and fired, not at a man, at the wagon's lantern. The bullet shattered glass. Oil sprayed. Flame leapt across canvas in a sudden blossom. The crowd recoiled, shouting. Horses screamed and stamped. Men stumbled back, bumping each other. Suddenly not a crowd anymore, but individuals, afraid of getting burned. The canvas caught fast. The crate beneath shifted hard. Chains clinked, louder now. A sound came from inside, low, pleased, like a breath drawn deep. Rusk's calm finally fractured into something sharp. "Put it out!" Too late. Fire ate the canvas. Smoke surged. The wagon's wood popped, and then the crate itself moved, not from men touching it, not from heat making boards warp. It moved with intention, pushing against its restraints, chains snapping taut. The crowd screamed and scattered. Cade advanced through the chaos straight toward Ma Hart. Danner saw him and stepped in front, lantern swinging like a weapon. His eyes were flat. "You don't learn," Danner said softly. Cade leveled the rifle at Danner's chest. "Move." Danner's lips curved faintly. "You won't shoot? You're not that kind of man." Cade's jaw clenched. "You don't know what kind of man Jonah made me." He fired. The shot hit Danner in the shoulder and spun him back, ripping a grunt out of him. Not dead, but down. Ma Hart screamed and lunged toward Cade, sobbing. "My babies! My—" Cade grabbed her and shoved her toward the shadows where Lila waited. "Go!" Lila surged forward, arms around her mother, hauling her back into darkness. Silas followed, crying, but moving. Rusk shouted over the chaos, voice furious. "Crane, stop them!" Crane appeared at the edge of the platform, face wild, raising a rifle toward the fleeing shapes. Then the burning wagon exploded in a shower of sparks as a wheel collapsed. The crate tore free. It didn't emerge like a man stepping out. It erupted, chains whipping, wood splitting, iron straps bending outward. Something tall rose from the wreckage, wreathed in smoke and flame, chains dragging behind it like a tail. The collar thing stood in the square, lit by firelight and terror. The crowd broke completely. Men dropped rifles. Women screamed. Someone fell and got trampled. Torches rolled in the dirt. Rusk backed toward the platform steps, face pale now, eyes fixed on the thing he'd fed for years. He lifted his hands as if he could command it again. "Back!" he hissed, "back into the dark." The thing's head tilted, slow. Then it spoke, loud enough for everyone to hear. Not a whisper now. A verdict. "Debt," it said, and the word shook in the bones of the town. It turned its faceless mask toward Rusk. Rusk's mouth opened, and for the first time, he looked like a man who understood he'd been wrong about control. "No," he whispered. The thing stepped toward him, chains scraping sparks off stone. Rusk spun and ran, actually ran, up the platform steps, knocking over the table, papers flying. He grabbed for the bell rope like he could wring his way out of consequence. The thing followed without hurry. Cade didn't stay to watch the end. He turned and ran into the darkness after Lila and Ma Hart and Silas, toward the cottonwoods, toward the creek, toward whatever life was left outside Dry Creek's reach. Behind him, the square filled with screaming and the crackle of fire, and over it all, one last sound carried, short, final, human. Judge Rusk's voice, breaking as something took him by the name. Then the bell rang once more by itself, a single dull toll, and went silent.